Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the Maelstrom Jedi who fell in love with Ahsoka, Star Wars. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Stormfront. The battle for Kyibria Prime had gone terribly wrong. Republic gunships fell from the smoke-choked sky like wounded birds, their metal hulls shredding against the jagged mountain ridges that dominated the northern continent. Through gaps in the churning clouds, glimpses of star destroyers exchanging fire with separatist battlecruisers painted the stratosphere in flashes of green and red. 3 battalions of clone troopers, nearly 2,000 men, were pinned down in a narrow valley, their forward progress halted by a network of ray shields and automated turrets that Republic intelligence had somehow missed entirely. Commander Cody ducked as another artillery shell screamed overhead, detonating against the ridgeline and showering his position with pulverized stone and dirt. General Kenobi, we've lost contact with the eastern flank. B Company reports separatist tanks moving to encircle our position. Obi-Wan Kenobi's lightsaber deflected a barrage of blaster fire, his expression grim beneath a layer of dust and sweat. We need to fall back and regroup. This position is untenable. The wounded won't make it if we retreat now, sir, Cody replied, gesturing toward the makeshift medical station where dozens of injured clones lay under the care of overtaxed field medics. A fresh wave of battle droids crested the far ridge, their synchronized march sending tremors through the valley floor. Thousands of them, far more than Republic intelligence had indicated, spread in a relentless metal tide toward the beleaguered Republic forces. Then we hold here as long as we can. Obi-Wan's voice betrayed no fear, though he knew the mathematics of their situation all too well. Commander, concentrate fire on that left flank. We need to. His tactical instruction was cut short by a thunderous boom from above. Every eye, organic and mechanical, turned skyward as a Republic shuttle burst through the cloud layer, its engine screaming in protest as it executed a dive no military pilot would attempt. Laser fire from separatist anti-aircraft batteries converged on the craft, which responded with a series of impossible rolls and jukes that defied both physics and common sense. Is that one of ours? Cody asked, unable to hide his astonishment. A faint smile crossed Obi-Wan's face. In a manner of speaking, the shuttle's descent steepened beyond all safe parameters, its hull glowing from atmospheric friction as it plummeted directly toward the heart of the droid army. At the last possible moment, the rear hatch blew outward. A single figure leapt from the doomed craft, plunging through the air as the shuttle itself crashed into the droid formation in a spectacular fireball that consumed hundreds of battle droids in an instant. The falling figure, too distant to identify clearly, seemed to hang suspended for a moment before physics reasserted itself. Even as the clones watched in fascination, the figure's descent slowed unnaturally, as though the very air had thickened around him. Sir, Cody said, lowering his macro binoculars, is that? Yes, Obi-Wan sighed, a complex mixture of relief and exasperation in his voice. That would be Naruto. The distant figure too, shed down in the midst of the separatist forces with an impact that sent a visible shockwave across the battlefield. A pause fell over the valley, a moment of collective disbelief from both sides, before chaos erupted anew. Even from their distant vantage, the clone commanders could see flashes of blue light as a lightsaber ignited among the droid ranks. But unlike any Jedi they had ever witnessed, this warrior moved like a tempest given human form. Where he passed, droids didn't simply fall, they were hurled aside in groups, crashed together in impossible configurations, or simply exploded where they stood. General, one of the clone lieutenants asked, what exactly are we seeing? Obi-Wan stroked his beard, eyes fixed on the distant battle. That, Lieutenant, is why they call him the Maelstrom Jedi. Naruto Uzumaki had learned long ago that the best way to make an entrance was to do something everyone else thought was impossible. It tended to disorient enemies, inspire allies, and, most importantly, be tremendously fun. As he carved through a squad of battle droids with his azure lightsaber, he couldn't suppress a grin. The droids, programming simply couldn't adapt to his unpredictable movement patterns. And their targeting algorithms failed spectacularly against an opponent who could be in 6 places simultaneously. Shadow clone jutsu, he called out, forming the Crow SS-shaped hand sign that the Jedi Council had spent years trying to discourage him from using. 5 perfect duplicates of himself materialized in puffs of smoke, each wielding an identical lightsaber. And sporting the same shock of spiky blonde hair and distinctive facial markings that resembled whiskers. The battle droid's processing units nearly overloaded at this impossibility. Their sensors detected 6 identical life forms where a moment ago there had been 1, each emitting identical force signatures, something no hologram could replicate. Roger, Roger. One droid asked another in confusion. Not Roger, Naruto replied, his clone sweeping the droid's legs while the original decapitated it with a casual flick of his lightsaber. Definitely not Roger. His clones scattered across the battlefield, each executing the same unorthodox but devastatingly effective combination of lightsaber techniques and force abilities that Naruto had developed over years of ignoring his master's insistence that he follow traditional forms. Where most Jedi used the Force as a supplement to their lightsaber combat, Naruto wielded it as an equal weapon, manifesting it in physical forms that baffled both allies and enemies. A super battle droid leveled its arm cannon at him, only to find its appendage encased in a swirling sphere of blue energy. Rasengan, Naruto shouted as the spiraling Force technique ground the droid's armored limb into scrap metal before detonating with enough force to take out 4 more droids behind it. In the command center overlooking the battlefield, a tactical droid. It observed the newcomer with as much alarm as its programming allowed. Anomalous Jedi detected, it reported to its separatist commander. Tactics do not match any known combat profiles. The Hood D figure receiving the transmission leaned forward, studying the holographic battlefield display with keen interest. How interesting. The Maelstrom has arrived. A pale hand gestured toward the display. Recalibrate targeting parameters. Converge all available units on that Jedi. Naruto sensed the shift in the bottle's flow immediately. The systematic attack patterns of the droids transformed into a singular focus, him. Tanks adjusted their trajectories, artillery repositioned, and the steady march of battle droids converged on his position from all directions. Well, that worked, he muttered, dispelling his remaining clones to conserve energy. The tactic had achieved exactly what he'd hoped, diverting the separatist Foss's attention from the trapped Republic troops and focusing it squarely on himself. Now came the hard part. Reaching into a pouch at his belt, Naruto withdrew a small, 3-pronged kunai knife, a weapon from his homeworld that had raised as many questions among Jedi as his unorthodox force techniques. He channeled force energy into the blade, causing ancient symbols etched into its surface to glow with blue light, then hurled it with precise calculation toward the nearest separatist tank. The knife embedded itself in the tank's armored hull, a trivial impact that wouldn't even register on the vehicle's damage sensors. But Naruto wasn't trying to damage it. He formed another hand sign, focusing intently on the marker he'd just created. In a flash of yellow light that left a brief afterimage in the vision of nearby droids, he vanished from his posit. Ion, and reappeared instantly atop the tank, directly where the knife had landed. Flying Thunder God technique, he announced to no one in particular, slicing open the tank's hatch with his lightsaber. And dropping a small sphere of swirling energy inside. And Rasengan for good measure. He leapt clear as the tank erupted from within, its armored shell bulging outward before succumbing to the spiraling force energy he'd planted inside. The explosion scattered nearby droids and created momentary confusion in the separatist ranks, exactly the opening the Republic troops needed. Keying his comlink, Naruto contacted the Republic command position. Hey, Obi-Wan, I've got their attention. Think you might want to move those troops while they're busy with me? Obi-Wan's voice came back with long-suffering tone of a man who had grown accustomed to unconventional allies. Already in progress, Naruto. Though a little advance notice of your arrival would have been appreciated. And miss the look on your face. Not a chance. Naruto grinned as he deflected a barrage of blaster fire back into the droid ranks. Besides, the council only cleared me for this mission 6 hours ago. Been flying full burn since Coruscant. 6 hours from Coruscant. That's not even. Obi-Wan's protest was cut short by the sound of renewed fighting. We'll discuss your disregard for astrogation safety later. Can you hold their attention for 15 more minutes while we evacuate the wounded? Naruto surveyed the converging separatist forces with a calculating eye. At least 2,000 battle droids, 8 tanks, and what looked like a full squadron of droid fighters sweeping in from the east. Objectively, terrible odds for a single Jedi. He grinned wider. Make it 20. I'm just getting warmed up. Padawan Ahsoka Tano had experienced many strange things since becoming Anakin Skywalker's apprentice, but the scene unfolding before her defied comprehension. She had arrived with Master Plo Koon's relief force expecting to participate in a desperate rescue mission. Instead, she found herself watching open-mouthed as a single Jedi wreaked havoc across the battlefield, moving with speed that strained her force-enhanced vision to track. Master Plo, she asked, turning to the Keldor Jedi Master beside her, who exactly is that? Master Plo's respirator mask made his expression unreadable, but a note of amusement colored his modulated voice. That would be Knight Uzumaki. One of our more unconventional Jedi. I've never seen a Jedi move like that, Ahsoka observed, watching. As Naruto somehow produced multiple copies of himself, each fighting with identical skill and power. Urdu, whatever that is. Naruto comes from a world where the Force manifests differently, Master Plo explained. The Jedi there, though they did not call themselves such, developed techniques unknown to the Order. He is perhaps the last practitioner of those arts. Below them, Naruto had Omhao positioned himself directly beneath a separatist command ship. As they watched, he extended his hands upward, and visible chains of golden energy erupted from his palms, wrapping around the ship's hull and beginning to drag it earthward despite its straining engines. That's impossible, Ahsoka breathed. With the Force, many things are possible beyond our limited understanding, Master Plo replied philosophically. Though I admit, Naruto tends to stretch those limits further than most. The command ship crashed into the ground with a thunderous impact that shook the gunship where they stood. Through swirling dust, they could see Naruto already moving to his next target, never pausing, never slowing. Commander, a clone officer reported, approaching with a datapad, General Ken. Obi reports the wounded are secured and they're beginning full withdrawal. General Uzumaki is providing cover. General Uzumaki, Ahsoka questioned. I thought you said he was a knight. He holds an unusual battlefield commission. Master Plo explained. The clone forces requested it after Felucia. Before Ahsoka could inquire further, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. Landing zone secured, General. We're touching down in 30 seconds. The gunship descended rapidly toward a hastily established landing zone where wounded clones were being loaded onto other transports. Master Plo turned to Ahsoka. I must coordinate with Master Kenobi. Take a squad and provide additional cover for the evacuation. Yes, Master, Ahsoka replied, already moving toward the clone troopers preparing for deployment. The moment the gunship touched down, Ahsoka led her squad toward the perimeter, where the sounds of battle still raged. The evacuation was proceeding efficiently, but the growing intensity of blaster fire indicated the Separatists had recognized the Republic's strategy and were now pressing their attack to prevent escape. Ahsoka ignited her lightsaber, its green blade humming to life as she deflected incoming fire from a new wave of battle droids that had broken through somewhere to the east. Set up a defensive position here, she ordered the clones. We need to hold Is line until the last transport is away. Yes, Commander, the sergeant acknowledged, directing his men to deploy portable shields and heavy weapons. The clone line had just stabilized when a massive explosion erupted from the eastern ridge, followed by the alarming sight of a separatist tank cresting the hill, its cannon already orienting toward the evacuation zone. Ahsoka calculated distances and angles with trained precision. The tank would have a clear shot at the medical transports in seconds, and neither she nor her squad had weapons capable of penetrating its armor quickly enough. Take cover, she shouted, preparing to use the Force to divert the inevitable blast as much as possible. The tank's cannon fired with a concussive boom, but the deadly energy bolt never reached its target. A blur of motion intercepted the blast midair, and Ahsoka blinked in astonishment as she recognized the distinctive form of Naruto Uzumaki. He had somehow positioned himself directly in the projectile's path and was now holding the concentrated energy at bay with a swirling shield of blue Force energy cupped between his palms. The energy bolt compressed into the spiraling shield, which panded to accommodate its power before reversing its direction entirely. The tank's own firepower was redirected back at its source with devastating accuracy, turning the vehicle into a smoking ruin. Naruto landed lightly beside Ahsoka, not even breathing hard despite the impossible feat he'd just performed. Up close, he was younger than she had expected, perhaps only a few years her senior, with bright blue eyes that contained an unsettling slitted pupil and facial markings unlike any species she recognized. "You must be Skywalker's Padawan," he said with a grin that revealed slightly elongated canines. "I'm Naruto. Nice timing with the reinforcements." Ahsoka found herself momentarily speechless, a rare occurrence that her master would have appreciated. She quickly recovered her composure. "Padawan Ahsoka Tano, and I think you have that backward. We came to rescue you." Naruto laughed, a sound so genuine and unrestrained that it seemed out of place on a battlefield. "Rescue? Nah, I had everything under control. Just giving the clankers something to think about while the wounded got clear." His casual dismissal of what she had witnessed, a single Jedi holding off an entire separatist battalion, struck Ahsoka as either profound humility or outrageous arrogance. She hadn't yet decided which. "Under control," she echoed skeptically. "You were outnumbered at least 500 to 1. "Exactly," Naruto replied with another grin. "Nearly fair odds." Before Ahsoka could formulate a response to this absurdity, her comlink activated. "Ahsoka," came Anakin's voice, "we need to move now. The Seps are bringing in reinforcements from orbit." "Acknowledged, Master," she replied, giving Naruto a final evaluating look. "We're on our way." As they turned toward the evacuation point, a barrage of missiles streaked toward their position from a distant ridge, too many to deflect, too widely dispersed to dodge. Without hesitation, Naruto stepped forward, his hands moving through a complex sequence of gestures that Ahsoka didn't recognize as any Jedi technique she'd ever studied. Earth style. Mud wall. The ground before them erupted upward, soil and stone coalescing into a massive barrier that rose 20 feet high in the space of a heartbeat. The missiles impacted against it with sequential detonations that shook the earth but failed to penetrate the impossibly dense fortification. "That's not," Ahsoka began, then stopped herself. She'd been about to say, "That's not how the Force works," but clearly, for this strange Jedi, it did. Naruto glanced at her with knowing amusement in his eyes. "Not what they taught you at the temple, right?" She nodded, unable to deny the obvious. "Yeah, the masters weren't too happy about it either," he admitted as they resumed their path to the evacuation point. "Spent half my training trying to get me to stop using hand signs and calling techniques by name. Said it was unnecessary verbalization and ritualization of force manipulation." "And why didn't you stop?" Ahsoka asked. Naruto shrugged. "Because it works better this way, for me, at least. The Force responds differently to different people. Trying to make everyone use it the same way is like..." He paused, searching for an analogy. "Like trying to make every species in the galaxy breathe the same atmosphere. Some adaptations are necessary." It was a perspective Ahsoka had never considered, one that seemed simultaneously logical and borderline heretical by temple standards. Before she could pursue the thought further, they reached the final transport where Masters Kenobi, Skywalker, and Plo Koon were coordinating the last stage of the evacuation. Anakin turned as they approached, his expression shifting from concern to relief at the sight of his Padawan. Then to something more complex when he noticed Naruto. "Uzumaki," he acknowledged with a nod that carried neither warmth nor hostility, merely recognition. "Skywalker," Naruto replied in the same tone. "Still flying like you're invincible." A hint of a smile touched Anakin's lips. "Still fighting like you're immortal. Only way to find out the limits," Naruto responded with a shrug. "Oh." Iwan stepped between them with the weary expression of a man preventing a familiar argument. "Perhaps we could continue this philosophical debate aboard the cruiser. The Separatists seem quite determined to make our continued presence on this planet untenable." As if to emphasize his point, a fresh barrage of artillery fire began to rain down near their position, though still far enough away to pose no immediate threat. "Master Kenobi is right," Plo Koon added. "Our mission was extraction, not engagement. That objective is now complete." The Jedi boarded the transport, which lifted off IMM. immediately and accelerated toward the upper atmosphere. Through the viewport, Ahsoka watched the battlefield recede, the crashed ships, the droid armies, and the unmistakable swath of destruction that marked Naruto's path through their ranks. "Quite impressive," Master Plo commented, following her gaze. "Though perhaps more destructive than our traditional approach." Traditional approaches weren't working, Naruto pointed out, dropping into a seat across from Ahsoka. "The Separatists had you pinned down with superior numbers and positioning. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most elegant one. A perspective you and Anakin seem to share," Obi-Wan observed dryly. Anakin, who had been quietly conferring with a clone officer, rejoined the conversation with a datapad in hand. "Speaking of perspectives, the initial casualty reports are in. Despite being outnumbered and outgunned, we lost only 38 men, most from the initial ambush. Medical expects at least 20 of the wounded to make full recoveries." 38 too many, Naruto said quietly, his earlier bravado vanishing into solemnity that surprised Ahsoka. "They have names, not just numbers." A moment of silence fell over the cabin, the automatic respect given to fallen comrades. Ahsoka noticed how the nearby clone troopers straightened slightly at Naruto's words, their posture reflecting subtle but definite appreciation. "What brought you to Kyibria, Naruto?" Obi-Wan asked eventually. "I wasn't aware the council had assigned you to this campaign." "They didn't. Not originally," Naruto replied. "I was RNING from a mission in the Mid-Rim when I received Master Yoda's message about your situation. The council approved my diversion when I was already halfway here." "Must have been an interesting conversation," Anakin remarked with the faintest smile. "The council isn't known for approving last-minute changes to mission parameters." Naruto's expression shifted into something more mischievous. "I can be pretty persuasive." "You mean stubborn," Obi-Wan corrected. "Same difference." The transport broke atmosphere, the turbulence of their ascent giving way to the smooth glide of space travel. As they approached the Republic cruiser waiting in orbit. Through the viewport, Ahsoka could see several separatist ships engaged with Republic forces at the far edge of the system. Evidently, the battle for Kyibria was far from over. Merely changing theaters from ground to space. The transport docked with a gentle shudder, and the Jedi disembarked into the organized chaos of a Star Destroyer preparing for potential combat. Clone troopers moved with practiced efficiency, wounded were transferred to medical bays, and officers consulted displays showing tactical positions throughout the system. Admiral Yularen approached as they entered the hangar, his posture as formal as ever despite the circumstances. "Generals, we've secured orbit for the moment, but Separatist reinforcements are expected within the hour. I recommend immediate withdrawal to friendly space." "Agreed, Admiral," Obi-Wan replied. "Our primary objective was extraction of forces, not holding the system." "Very good, sir. I'll prepare for the jump to hyperspace." Yularen turned to leave, then paused, noticing Naruto. "General Uzumaki, I wasn't informed you would be joining us." "Last-minute addition, Admiral," Naruto said with a casual salute. "Hope you don't mind." "Not at all, sir. The men still speak of your actions at Felucia." A rare smile briefly crossed Yularen's normally stern features. "I'll have quarters prepared." As the Admiral departed, Ahsoka turned to her master. "What happened at Felucia?" Anakin and Obi-Wan exchanged glances, while Naruto suddenly became very interested in adjusting his utility belt. "Perhaps that's a story for another time," Master Plo suggested diplomatically. "We should report to the council on the outcome of our mission." The group made their way toward the bridge, with Ahsoka falling into step beside Naruto. Her curiosity about this unorthodox Jedi had only grown with each passing minute. He used the Force in ways she'd never seen, fought with techniques unknown to the Order, and somehow managed to inspire both deep respect and obvious wariness from masters she admired. "So," she began, keeping her voice low enough that the others walking ahead wouldn't hear. "You're not going to tell me what happened at Felucia either." Naruto glanced at her, amusement dancing in his unusual eyes. "Let's just say it involved a lot of battle droids, a rancor that D escaped from a Separatist research facility, and me proving that sometimes the direct approach is the best approach." "That doesn't actually tell me anything," Ahsoka pointed out. "Exactly," Naruto replied with a wink. "Keeps the mystery alive." Ahsoka rolled her eyes. "Now you sound like Master Yoda." always with the cryptic answers. Cryptic, I am not, Naruto replied in a passable imitatee. On of the ancient Jedi Master's distinctive speech pattern. Simply selective with information, yes. Despite herself, Ahsoka laughed. There was something refreshing about Naruto's lack of pretension. A directness that reminded her of her own master, but without the undercurrent of intensity that sometimes made Anakin difficult to approach. Their conversation was interrupted as they reached the bridge, where a holographic transmission from the Jedi Council was already waiting. The blue-tinged figures of Masters Yoda, Windu, and several others stood in solemn conference, their attention turning to the arriving Jedi. Master Kenobi, Mace Windu acknowledged. We've received your preliminary report. The loss of Kyibria is unfortunate, but the successful extraction of our forces is commendable under the circumstances. Thank you, Master Windu, Obi-Wan replied with a slight bow. Though I must give credit where it's due. Without Knight Uzumaki's timely arrival and unorthodox tactics, our casualties would have been significantly higher. All eyes turned to Naruto, who stepped forward with a respectful bow that nonetheless lacked the formal depth that temple protocol would dictate. Glad to help, he said simply. Right place, right time. Master Yoda's holographic image regarded Naruto with an inscrutable expression. Fortuitous, your arrival was. Yet since I do that more than coincidence guided your path. Naruto's casual demeanor shifted subtly. The Force led me to Kyibria, Master Yoda. I followed its guidance. Indeed. Yoda's ears twitched slightly, a gesture Ahsoka had learned indicated thoughtfulness. Much to discuss we have, but not through hologram. Return to Coruscant, you should. All of us, Master Yoda. Anakin questioned. The Separatists are likely to regroup and push further into the sector once we withdraw. Master Windu shook his head. We've received intelligence that may change our strategic priorities. Something potentially more significant than tactical positioning in the Outer Rim. More significant than losing an entire sector. Obi-Wan asked with raised eyebrows. An artifact has been recovered from a separatist archaeological expedition on Kybria's southern continent, Master Windu explained. Initial reports suggest it may be connected to ancient Force techniques, specifically, those originating from Uzuio. Ahsoka iced an immediate change in Naruto's posture, a sudden tension that hadn't been present even during the heat of battle. His eyes narrowed, the slitted pupils contracting to thin lines. Uzuio, he repeated, the name carrying weight beyond its simple pronunciation. Are you certain? Master Yoda nodded slowly. The spiral patterns, distinctive they are. And sense your connection to this artifact, we do. What exactly was recovered? Naruto asked, his voice controlled but urgent. A fragment only, Master Windu replied. But inscribed with symbols similar to those you've described from your homeworld. Symbols related to the sealing techniques your people developed. Ahsoka watched Naruto's reaction with growing curiosity. She had never heard of Uzuio, nor did she know anything about Naruto's background beyond the vague explanation Master Plo had offered. Yet clearly, this discovery held profound significance for him. I need to see it, Naruto said, his tone making it more declaration than request. And see it you shall, Master Yoda assured him. But patience, you must have. Secure transport of the artifact to Coruscant has been arranged. Upon your return, examine it together we will. The conversation continued, turning to logistics of withdrawal and strategic redeployment of forces, but Ahsoka's attention remained fixed on Naruto. Throughout the remainder of the briefing, he maintained an outward calm. But she could sense turbulence beneath the surface, powerful emotions held in careful check. When the transmission ended, the Jedi dispersed to their various duties aboard ship. Ahsoka found herself following Naruto as he moved toward the viewport, staring out at the stars with uncharacteristic stillness. What's Uzuio? She asked directly, coming to stand beside him. For a moment, she thought he might not answer. Then, without turning from the viewport, he spoke softly. Uzuio was my home, a world in the Outer Rim, beyond the boundaries of Republic space. A place where the Force flowed differently than anywhere else in the galaxy. His reflection in the transparisteel showed a distant expression. It was destroyed when I was very young. I am, as far as I know, the last survivor. I'm sorry, Ahsoka said, genuine sympathy in her voice. I didn't know. Few do, Naruto replied. It's not something I discuss often, even with the council. They know the basic facts, but not the details. What details? Naruto turned to her then, studying her face as though weighing something important. Did you ever wonder why they call me the Maelstrom Jedi? I assumed it was because of how you fight, like a force of nature. A small smile touched his lips. Partially. But, Naruto, itself means, maelstrom, in the language of my people. A spiraling vortex of water, unpredictable, powerful, transformative. Your parents named you well, Ahsoka observed. They named me prophetically, Naruto corrected. Though whether that prophecy was a blessing or a curse remains to be seen. Before she could ask what he meant, Naruto's comlink chirped. He checked it with a brief glance. Master Yoda requests a private conference. Probably wants more details about what happened down there. Quote, or about this artifact, Ahsoka suggested. Probably both. Naruto straightened, his moment of reflection passing as quickly as it had appeared. The confident, slightly irreverent Jedi she had first met returned to the fore. Nice meeting you, Padawan Tano. I have a feeling our paths will be crossing again soon. With that enigmatic statement, he departed, leaving Ahsoka with far more questions than answers about the mysterious Maelstrom Jedi. The hyperspace journey to Coruscant provided Naruto with something he rarely permitted himself, time for reflection. In his private quarters aboard the Star Destroyer, he sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed in meditation, not the serene emptiness the Jedi Masters advocated, but the active calm. Union with his inner self that his Uzuio training had emphasized. Within the mindscape of his meditation, he stood before the massive gate that contained his oldest companion and greatest burden. Behind those towering bars, crimson eyes the size of speeders regarded him with ancient intelligence. They've found something from home, Naruto said to the entity. The nine-tailed fox shifted its massive form, tails swaying hypnotically behind it. When it spoke, its voice resonated not through air but through the force itself, a rumbling vibration that Naruto felt in his very essence. After all this time, interesting. The fox's massive muzzle drew back in what might have been a smile or a snarl. What do you think it means, Kit? I don't know, Naruto admitted. But I can feel it, something changing in the force. Like ripples spreading outward from a stone dropped in still water. Ripples can become tsunamis with sufficient force, the fox observed. Be wary. The Uzuio sealing techniques were not meant for those who do not understand their price. You think the separatists are trying to replicate our sealing jutsu? To what end? The fox's laughter shook the mental landscape. What do power-hungry beings always seek? Control, dominance, weapons. And there is no weapon in the galaxy more powerful than a tailed beast. Naruto frowned at the implication. They'd need a living host for that kind of seal. And knowledge that died with Uzuio. Knowledge has a way of surviving, even when civilizations do not. The fox's eyes narrowed. That girl, Skywalker's apprentice. She interests you. The sudden change of subject caught Naruto off guard. Ahsoka, I just met her, yet you revealed more to her in one conversation than you have to most of the Jedi in years. She asked direct questions, and there was something about her. Naruto paused, considering. She didn't look at me the way the others do, with suspicion or concern or even awe. Just curiosity, honest curiosity. Be careful, Kit. Attachments are dangerous for someone like you, as your precious Jedi code warns. Naruto snorted. Since when do you advocate following the Jedi code? I don't. The fox replied with another rumbling laugh. I merely point out the irony that in this one instance, their fear might be justified. Your emotions affect me as well, remember. How could I forget? You never let me. Naruto smiled despite himself. His relationship with the Nine Tails had evolved over the years from antagonistic to cautiously cooperative something approaching friendship, though neither would ever use that term. Regardless, the fox continued, this artifact may represent an opportunity. Perhaps even answers about what truly happened to Uzuio. The fox's words touched on Naruto's deepest unresolved questions, the mysteries surrounding his homeworld's destruction, the reason he alone had survived, and the true purpose behind the sealing of the Nine Tails within him. The Jedi had found him as a child, the sole survivor of a catastrophe they didn't understand, with a cosmic force entity bound to his soul through techniques beyond their comprehension. I should get back, Naruto said after a long moment of contemplation. We'll be reaching Coruscant soon. Remember, Kit, where Uzushio's legacy appears, danger follows. Trust your instincts, not their dogma. With that final warning, the mindscape dissolved, and Naruto returned to physical awareness in his quarters. He opened his eyes, the slight redness adding from their usual blue as the fox's influence receded to its normal background level. His comlink chimed. Perfect timing, as always. Uzumaki, he answered. We're approaching Coruscant, came Obi-Wan's voice. The council has requested our immediate presence upon landing. No rest for the weary, huh? Naruto stretched as he rose to his feet. I'll be right there. He clipped the comlink back to his belt and moved to the small viewport in his quarters. The swirling blue tunnel of hyperspace surrounded the ship, a visual reminder of their rapid transit across the galaxy. Soon, those aotic energies would resolve into the ordered patterns of Coruscant's orbital lanes, the glittering ecumenopolis that had become his adopted home. Yet as he watched the hyperspace distortion, Naruto couldn't shake the feeling that he was traveling in more ways than one, not just across space, but backward in time, toward the secrets of his origins and the true legacy of Uzushio. The Jedi Tem. Please analysis chamber was rarely used for artifacts, the Order preferred to study most recovered items in the more secure archives. But the unusual nature of this particular discovery had prompted additional precautions, including limited access and specialized containment. Naruto stood before the sealed transparasteel case, studying the object within with intense concentration. It was a fragment of what appeared to be a stone tablet, roughly triangular in shape where it had broken from a larger hole. Etched into its surface were intricate spiral patterns interwoven with script that would be indecipherable to anyone unfamiliar with the language of Uzushio. Can you read it? Master Windu asked, standing beside him with arms folded in his characteristic pose. Parts of it, Naruto replied, leaning closer. It's damaged, and I was young when I left Uzushio. My knowledge of the written language is incomplete. But you recognize the patterns, Master Yoda observed from his hovering chair. Naruto nodded slowly. These are fuinjutsu diagrams, sealing techniques. Very advanced ones. He traced a particular spiral pattern in the air above the fragment. This sequence here is used for containing and channeling massive amounts of force energy. Containing it within what? Obi-Wan asked. Naruto hesitated, his hand unconsciously moving to rest over his stomach, where an elaborate seal marked his skin beneath his robes. Traditionally, within a person. A silence fell over the chamber as the implications settled among the gathered masters. Naruto was acutely aware of their sked questions, the same questions that had surrounded him since his arrival at the temple as a child. Questions about the Nine Tails, about why such a powerful force entity had been sealed within him, and about the ethics and wisdom of such a practice. Dangerous knowledge, this is, Master Yoda said finally. If fall into separatist hands, it did. More dangerous than you realize, Naruto agreed. These techniques require specific conditions and preparations. Used incorrectly, they could tear the user apart, or worse, create an unstable binding that could release untold energy. Like a bomb, Anakin asked, speaking for the first time since they'd entered the chamber. Like a force nexus suddenly collapsing, Naruto corrected. It wouldn't just destroy matter, it would distort the force itself in the affected area. Possibly permanently. Master Windu's expression grew even more severe. Then we must locate any remaining fragments before the separatists can make use of them. Where was this found? Naruto asked. The southern continent of Kyibria, Obi-Wan explained. A separatist archaeological team had established a dig site in what appeared to be ancient ruins. When our forces arrived, they abandoned the site, but left this behind in their haste. Naruto frowned. That doesn't sound like the separatists. They don't abandon valuable finds without a fight. Unless the Y had already found what they were truly seeking, Master Plo suggested. The unspoken conclusion hung in the air. This fragment might be merely a discarded piece, with the separatists already in possession of more complete or valuable portions. I need to examine the site where this was found, Naruto said decisively. There might be clues about what they were really looking for, and whether they found it. Master Windu exchanged glances with Master Yoda. Kyibria is now under Separatist control. A return mission would be high risk, with minimal Republic support available in that sector. The more reason for a small team rather than a full military operation, Naruto countered. I can move undetected where armies can't. Not alone, you should go, Master Yoda stated. Clouded, this matter is support you will need. I'll go with him, came a voice from the chamber entrance. All heads turned to see Ahsoka standing in the doorway, her posture conveying determination despite her youth. Padawan Tano, Master Windu acknowledged with a slight frown. This briefing was restricted. My apologies, Masters, she said with a respectful bow. I was asked to deliver this datapad. With the complete scan analysis of the artifact, she held up the device as evidence of her legitimate presence. But I heard enough to understand the situation, and I volunteered to accompany Knight Uzumaki. Anakin stepped forward, concern evident in his expression. Ahsoka, this isn't your assignment, and infiltrating Separatist-controlled territory is beyond your current experience level. With respect, Master, she replied with characteristic boldness, I've infiltrated Separatist facilities before, and this mission requires stealth and adaptability, not overwhelming force. Naruto watched the exchange with growing interest. The Padawan had spirit, that much was certain. And there was logic in her argument, though he suspected her motivation went beyond simple duty. Actually, he interjected, having a Padawan along might be advantageous. The Separatists would be looking for a known Jedi Knight like me, not a Master Padawan pair on a training mission. Master Yoda's ears twitched as he considered the suggestion. A reasonable point, this is. But Skywalker's Padawan, young Tano is. His decision, it must be. All eyes turned to Anakin, whose expression conveyed his internal conflict. Ahsoka met his gaze steadily, silently pleading her case. After a long moment, Anakin sighed. She has demonstrated exceptional ability in infiltration operations. And she's right, this kind of mission suits her skills. He turned to Ahsoka with a stern expression. But you will follow Knight Uzumaki's lead without question, and maintain constant communication when possible. Is that understood? Yes, Master, Ahsoka replied, unable to entirely suppress a victorious smile. It's settled then, Master Windu concluded. Knight Uzumaki and Padawan Tano will investigate the archaeological site on Kyibria. Your objective is information gathering only. Determine what the Separatists found, and whether it poses a threat similar to this fragment. When do we leave? Naruto asked. Tomorrow, Obi-Wan answered. We need time to prepare appropriate cover identities and a suitable vessel that won't attract attention in Separatist space. As the meeting concluded, Naruto found hymns. LF walking alongside Ahsoka through the temple corridors. Her excitement was palpable, though she maintained the composed exterior expected of a Jedi Padawan. Thanks for backing me in there, she saw it once they were out of earshot of the Masters. I meant what I said, Naruto replied. A Padawan makes for good cover. Though I suspect your interest goes beyond tactical advantages. Ahsoka glanced at him, then conceded with a slight smile. I'm curious about you, and about Uzuio. The way you use the Force, it's unlike anything I've seen or read about in the archives. And you want to learn, wouldn't you? If you encountered something new, something that challenged everything you thought you understood about the Force. Naruto couldn't help but laugh. That's a dangerous attitude in the temple, Padawan Tano. The Masters prefer certainty to curiosity when it comes to Force traditions. Maybe that's why they keep you at arm's length, she observed with surprising insight. Maybe, Naruto agreed, his smile fading slightly, or maybe they're right to be cautious. Not all knowledge is beneficial, especially when it comes to techniques designed for war. Is that what these sealing techniques were for? Warfare. Naruto paused, considering how to explain concepts that had been second nature on his homeworld but were entirely foreign to Jedi philosophy. Not exactly, he said carefully. They were created to maintain balance, to contain power too great or dangerous to exist unchecked in the world. The nine-tailed fox that I carry was one such power. Ahsoka's eyes widened. You carry what exactly? Naruto realized he'd said more than intended, again. Something about this Padawan seemed to bypass his usual caution. That's a longer conversation, he said, deflecting slightly. One we can have on the journey to Kyibria. For now, we should focus on mission preparation. Ahsoka accepted the boundary, though her expression made it clear she wouldn't forget the revelation. "I'll meet you at the hangar tomorrow, then." As she departed, Naruto found himself wondering if Master Yoda had foreseen this development. The ancient Jedi often arranged situations with multiple layers of purpose, and pairing him with Skywalker's curious Padawan seemed potentially deliberate. Returning to his quarters, a modest room that he had nonetheless personalized with small t. Ouches that would have raised eyebrows among the more orthodox Jedi, Naruto began packing for the mission. Unlike most Jedi who traveled with minimal possessions, he carried specialized equipment adapted from Uzuio traditions, sealing scrolls, custom-designed kunai, and tags inscribed with fuinjutsu symbols that could be activated in emergencies. As he carefully packed these items, his thoughts turned to the fragment they had examined. The spiral patterns had been unmistakably Uzuio in origin, but something about them had seemed different. Adapted, perhaps, or evolved from the techniques he remembered. And the text, what little he could read of it, had contained references to vessels and harmonization that suggested purposes beyond simple containment. "They're trying to create Jinchuriki," came the Nine-Tails voice in his mind, using the Uzuio term for those who, like Naruto, hosted tailed beasts. "That's impossible," Naruto replied aloud, knowing the fox could hear him. "They'd need an actual tailed beast, not just the technique." "Are you certain? This galaxy is vast, Kit, and there are many kinds of power that could be bound with the right seals." The fox's words sent a chill through Naruto. He had always assumed that the tailed beasts were unique to Uzuio, manifestations of the force specific to his homeworld. But if there were other entities that could be bound in similar ways? His packing forgotten, Naruto moved to the small window of his quarters, gazing out at the endless cityscape of Coruscant. Somewhere out there, beyond the artificial lights and towering structures, beyond the known systems and charted hyperspace routes, lay answers about his past, and potentially, warnings about the future. Tomorrow, he would begin finding those answers, with an unexpected companion at his side. Whether that was the will of the Force or simply chance remained to be seen. For now, as twilight deepened over the Jedi Temple, Naruto Uzumaki, the last son of Uzuio, the Maelstrom Jedi, the Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed Fox, prepared himself for whatever revelations awaited on Kyibria. And somewhere deep within him, ancient power stirred in anticipation. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, Echoes of Uzuio. Starlight fractured across the viewport as the light freighter spiral shadow dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kyibria system. The vessel, unremarkable in design and sporting the weathered appearance of a trader that had seen better decades, drifted for several moments, passive sensors sweeping the surrounding space for patrol vessels or automated security nets. In the cockpit, Naruto Uzumaki sat with his eyes closed, extending his awareness through the Force rather than relying solely on technology. "Two separatist cruisers in high orbit around Kyibria Prime," he reported. "Droid control ships at the 4th and 7th lunar positions. Automated scanning buoys throughout the approach vectors." Ahsoka checked the sensor readouts, confirming what Naruto had sensed, but the ship's systems were only beginning to detect. "Your range is impressive," she observed, adjusting their trajectory toward the system's outer gas giant. "Most Jedi can't sense ship positions with that precision." "It's not precision so much as presence," Naruto replied, opening his eyes. "I'm not sensing the ships themselves, but the ripples they see. Radiate in the Force, like stones dropped in still water." "Still useful," Ahsoka noted pragmatically, her fingers dancing across the navigation console. "We'll use the gas giant's magnetic field to mask our approach, then skip through the debris field between the 5th and 6th planets. That should put us on a wide approach to Kybria's southern hemisphere." Naruto grinned, watching her work. "Not your first infiltration rodeo, I take it." "Master Skywalker believes in practical education," she replied with a hint of pride. "And creative solutions to security systems. Their cover identities had been carefully constructed. Salvage operators with documentation showing contracts to recover materials from battlefields after Republic withdrawal. Such operations were common enough in Separati, Saint-controlled territories that they were generally permitted with proper licensing, which Republic intelligence had forged with meticulous attention to detail." The spiral shadow slipped into the gas giant's turbulent atmosphere. skimming layers of multicolored clouds that refracted the distant sun into prismatic patterns across the cockpit. Ahsoka piloted with confident precision, using the planet's electromagnetic interference to scramble any long-range scans that might detect their presence. So, she ventured as they settled into the long approach, "You are going to tell me about the nine-tailed fox?" Naruto sighed, leaning back in the co-pilot's seat. He'd been expecting the question since their departure from Coruscant, though Ahsoka had shown surprising restraint in waiting nearly 6 hours before raising it. "It's not a simple story," he began. "On Uzuio, the Force manifests in ways different from what the Jedi understand. There were beings, 9 of them, that embodied pure Force energy. So concentrated and powerful that they couldn't be destroyed or contained by conventional means. Like Force nexuses, but sentient?" Ahsoka asked, her brow furrowing in concentration. "Something like that. They were called the tailed beasts, the 9 tails being the most powerful." Naruto's hand unconsciously moved to his midsection. "My people developed techniques to seal these beings within human hosts, Jinchuriki. They called us living vessels." Ahsoka's eyes widened. That's not like any Jedi teaching I've ever heard. "The Jedi fear such connections," Naruto said matter-of-factly. "They believe in maintaining distance from the Force, using it rather than merging with it. On Uzuio, the approach was different, harmony through connection, even with forces that might seem destructive. And you've carried this being since childhood. How does that even work?" Naruto considered how to explain a lifetime of experiences in terms a Jedi Padawan might understand. "Imagine having another consciousness within you, separate but connected. The 9 tails has its own thoughts, memories, personality. For many years, our relationship was adversarial. And now," a small smile crossed Naruto's face. "Complicated. But we've reached an understanding. The seal allows us to share power while maintaining separate identities. Can you?" Ahsoka hesitated, clearly wondering if her next question crossed a line. "Can you communicate with it?" "Him," Naruto corrected gently. "And yes, though he doesn't particularly enjoy being discussed like a curiosity." As if on cue, a rumbling chuckle echoed through Naruto's consciousness, audible only to him. "She's persistent, this one, ***, the 9 tails observed. "Reminds me of you at that age." Ignoring the comment, Naruto turned his attention back to their approach vector. "We should prepare for atmospheric entry. The archaeological site is in a remote area, but the Separatists have likely established automated surveillance." Recognizing the boundary he'd established, Ahsoka refocused on piloting. "There's a heavy storm system moving across the southern continent. We can use it for cover during our descent." The spiral shadow emerged from the gas giant's atmospheric layers and accelerated on a curved trajectory that would appear, to casual observation, to be a standard merchant route toward Kybria's trading outposts. Only as they approached the planet itself did Ahsoka adjust their course, diving into the upper atmosphere at a steep angle that sent vibrations shuddering through the ship's frame. Thick cloud layers enveloped them, static electricity dancing across the viewport as they penetrated a massive thunderhead. Lightning flashed around them, natural camouflage against separatist sensors that might otherwise track their descent. "I'm picking up a landing zone 8 kilometers from the archaeological site," Ahsoka reported, studying terrain scans through the interference. "Looks like dense forest coverage. Should conceal the ship while we're on the ground." Naruto nodded approval. "Perfect. We'll make our approach to the site on foot, less chance of detection that way." The freighter broke through the cloud base into driving rain, revealing a landscape of towering forests that stretched to distant mountains. Ancient trees with trunks wider than starfighters create a dense canopy that further obscured them from orbital surveillance as Ahsoka guided the ship toward a small clearing barely large enough to accommodate their vessel. Landing struts sank into soft earth as the spiral shadow settled onto the forest floor with a gentle shudder. Immediately, the sounds of the alien ecosystem enveloped them, the drumming of rain on the hull, the creaking of massive trees in the wind, and the distant calls of native wildlife disturbed by their arrival. "Home sweet home," Naruto quipped, powering down systems to minimize their energy signature. At least for the next few days. They gathered essential equipment in waterproof packs, surveillance gear, climbing tools, rations, and their lightsabers carefully concealed beneath civilian clothing. Naruto added Several scrolls marked with intricate symbols and a pouch of custom-designed kunai to his kit, catching Ahsoka's curious glance. Uzuio techniques require specialized tools, he explained, tucking he items into inner pockets of his weather-resistant jacket. Some jutsus need a physical focus. Jutsu, Ahsoka repeated, testing the unfamiliar word. The techniques of channeling the Force, Naruto clarified. What the Jedi would call Force abilities, we categorized into different types of jutsu based on their effects and execution. The ship's ramp descended, admitting a gust of rain-laden wind that carried the rich scent of vegetation and wet earth. Stepping out into the downpour, they were immediately soaked despite the partial shelter of enormous fronds that hung from the nearest trees. Naruto closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sensations wash over him. The coolness of the rain, the electric feel of the storm's energy, the living pulse of the forest around them. It reminded him, in some small way, of Uzuio's lush wilderness areas where he had played as a child before the catastrophe. This way, he said, orienting himself through a combination of memory and force awareness. The site is northeast from here, in the foothills. They moved through the forest with the silent efficiency of trained Jedi, Naruto leading with Ahsoka close behind. Despite the difficult terrain and limited visibility, they maintained a steady pace, occasionally using force-enhanced jumps to traverse obstacles or cross small ravines. The rain continued unabated, transforming the Saint floor into a network of muddy streams and pools that reflected the occasional flash of lightning overhead. After an hour of travel, Naruto paused, his head tilting slightly as though listening to something beyond normal hearing. "What is it?" Ahsoka whispered, instantly alert. "We're not alone in these woods," he murmured. "Someone else is moving parallel to our course, about half a kilometer to the west." Ahsoka extended her senses but detected only the ambient life forms of the forest. "I don't sense anything. They're masking their presence, quite skillfully." Naruto's eyes narrowed. But masking creates its own disturbance if you know what to look for. Like a stone beneath the surface of a stream, you can't see it, but you can see how the water flows around it. Separatist Scout. Naruto shook his head. Organic, not mechanical, and moving with purpose toward the same destination as us. They altered their course slightly, maintaining their heading toward the archaeology Cal site but adjusting to bring them closer to the mysterious traveler. The forest grew denser as they progressed, massive root systems creating natural barricades that required careful navigation. Yet despite the challenging terrain, the presence Naruto had detected moved with fluid grace, suggesting intimate familiarity with wilderness environments. "Whoever they are, they've done this before," Naruto observed quietly. They crested a small rise, and through a momentary break in the canopy, caught their first glimpse of the archaeological site in the near distance, a sprawling complex of partially excavated ruins nestled against a mountainside. Even from this distance, the distinctive architecture was unmistakable to Naruto. The curved lines, spiral motifs, and balanced proportions that characterized Uzuio construction. His heart constricted at the sight. Though he had known intellectually what to expect, the emotional impact of seeing remnants of his homeworld's culture on this distant planet struck harder than anticipated. "Naruto," Ahsoka's voice broke through his reverie, her tone urgent. "Look." She pointed toward a small clearing where a solitary figure stood beneath the partial shelter of a massive fern, apparently studying a handheld device. Even in the dim light and falling rain, certain details were immediately apparent. Female, near human, clad in form-fitting dark attire that blended with the forest. Most notably, she wore no visible insignia of either Republic or Separatist affiliation. "That's our shadow," Naruto confirmed, observing how she moved with a fighter's economy of motion. "Let's introduce ourselves." Before Ahsoka could suggest a more cautious approach, Naruto stepped deliberately on a fallen branch, creating a sharp crack that carried even through the rain's constant patter. The woman reacted instantly, the device disappearing into a pouch as she dropped into a defensive stance, one hand moving to a weapon concealed at her hip. Our eyes, a startling violet hue that seemed to catch what little light filtered through the canopy, scanned the trees with predatory intensity. "I know you're there," she called out, her voice carrying a distinctive accent Ahsoka couldn't place. "Show yourselves, or I start making educated guesses about your location." Naruto stepped into the clearing with his hands held open at his sides, projectile ing an air of casual confidence that belied his readiness to react if necessary. Looks like we're all headed the same way, he observed conversationally, as though encountering another traveler in the middle of a storm-drenched forest on a separatist-controlled world was perfectly normal. The woman's posture remained coiled with potential energy, her gaze flicking between Naruto and Ahsoka as the Padawan emerged from the trees. Salvagers, she asked skeptically, taking in their civilian attire. That's what our permits say, Naruto replied with a disarming smile. I'm Nato, this is Ahsoka. We, re-licensed to recover materials from the abandoned Republic positions. The battlefield is 50 kilometers north, the woman pointed out. You're walking in the wrong direction. We heard there might be something worth salvaging at the archaeological site, Ahsoka improvised, adopting the slightly rough demeanor of a salvage operator. Abandoned in a hurry, according to our sources. The woman's eyes narrowed fractionally. Your sources failed to mention the automated security systems and droid patrols, then. Part of the job, Naruto shrugged. Nothing worth having comes easy. A moment of calculation played across the woman's features before she seemed to reach a decision. Talia, she offered, though whether it was her real name remained questionable. Independent researcher. Researching what, exactly? Ahsoka asked. Cultural anthropology, specifically focusing on Force traditions outside the Jedi-Sith paradigm. The straightforwardness of her answer suggested at least partial truth. The ruins ahead show evidence of techniques unknown in current practice. Naruto felt a flicker of surprise and wariness. Few outside the Jedi Order possessed such specific knowledge about Force traditions. And fewer still would recognize Uzuio techniques from archaeological evidence alone. Sounds fascinating, he replied, maintaining his cover persona. Any chance you'd be interested in pooling resources? Security systems are easier to handle with more people. Talia studied him with unsettling intensity, as though peering beneath his casual exterior. Perhaps, she finally conceded. Though I suspect we have different priorities once inside. Undoubtedly, Naruto agreed, but getting inside comes first. Their uneasy alliance formed, the three continued toward the archaeological site. With Talia now moving openly alongside them. The rain began to slacken as they approached the foothills, giving way to a fine mist that hung between the massive trees like suspended gossamer. The separatists abandoned the site 3 days ago, Talia informed them as they walked. Official reports claim it was due to Republic advances, but that's clearly false given recent battlefield developments. You think they found what they were looking for? Ahsoka asked. Talia's mouth curved in a knowing smile. Or they found something they weren't prepared to handle. As they drew closer to the ruins, Naruto extended his senses more carefully, searching for the security measures Talia had mentioned. The familiar electronic signatures of battle droids registered at regular intervals around the perimeter, a standard patrol pattern designed more to detect intruders than to actively prevent entry by determined infiltrators. 2 droid teams, 6-minute rotations, he murmured to his companions. Automated sensors at ground level, but nothing in the canopy. Talia raised an eyebrow. Impressive assessment. Your scanners must be more sophisticated than they look. I've got good eyes, Naruto replied simply. They paused at the edge of the clearing that surrounded the ruins, observing the site from the shelter of the forest. Even partially excavated, the scale of the complex was impressive. A series of stepped structures built into the mountainside, with the distinctive spiral patterns of Uzuio architecture incorporated into every visible surface. At the center, a massive circular platform lay open to the sky, its intricate pattern of concentric circles and radiating lines clearly designed for some ceremonial purpose. It's beautiful, Ahsoka whispered, genuine awe in her voice. It was, Naruto agreed softly, ancient memories stirring at the familiar sights. Even this smaller outpost carried the essence of Uzuio's grand architecture, the harmonious balance of form and function. The integration with natural surroundings, the symbolic representation of flowing energy through physical structures. Talia glanced at him sharply, catching the personal note in his response. But said nothing. They waited as a droid patrol passed the sector nearest their position, then moved swiftly between sensor zones, using the excavated trenches and partially restored walls as cover. Naruto led them toward what appeared to be a secondary entrance, less obvious than the main processional way that led to the central platform, and consequently less likely to be heavily monitored. The passage they entered was narrow, its walls inscribed with flowing script that disappeared into darkness beyond the reach of their low-powered glow rods. Naruto ran his fingers over the ancient characters, a complex emotion tightening his throat as he recognized phrases from the bedtime stories of his childhood. The whirlpool draws all to its center, yet returns all to the endless sea. He translated softly, almost to himself. You can read this? Talia asked, her tone carefully neutral. Naruto caught himself, remembering his cover identity. Parts of it. I've encountered similar writing before, in my salvage work. Talia's expression suggested she found this explanation inadequate, but she pressed no further as they continued deeper into the complex. The passage gradually widened, opening into a chamber where evidence of the Separatists' work was clearly visible: excavation equipment, analysis stations, and cataloging systems arranged around a central artifact that immediately captured Naruto's attention. Standing in the middle of the chamber was a stone pillar approximately 2 meters tall, carved in the shape of a stylized flame. Around its base, 9 distinct animal figures formed a protective circle, each recognizable to Naruto as representations of the tailed beasts. The sight sent a jolt through him that the 9 tails felt as well. A resonant vibration in their shared connection. They found a shrine, ****, the fox observed within Naruto's mind, its tone uncharacteristically solemn. A place of communion. What exactly were they studying here? Ahsoka asked, examining the abandoned equipment. Talia moved to one of the analysis stations, activating its display with practiced familiarity. According to these records, they were attempting to decipher the energy manipulation techniques depicted in the inscriptions. The data shows unusual force patterns emanating from specific sequences of symbols. They were trying to replicate the techniques, Naruto concluded, his voice hardening slightly. Without success, apparently, Talia noted, scrolling through the data. The records indicate multiple failed attempts, resulting in energy destabilization, their clinical term for what I suspect were rather spectacular failures. Ahsoka had moved to another console, her fingers deftly bypassing security measures. Quote, they were looking for something specific, she reported. These search parameters are focused on containment and transference methods. Naruto exchanged a glance with her, both thinking of the fragment they had examined on Coruscant. The Separatists weren't just studying Uzuio techniques out of academic interest, they were seeking specific applications related to the sealing and manipulation of force entities. Moving closer to the pillar, Naruto examined the carved figures at its base. Each represented one of the tailed beasts in stunning detail despite their small size, the 1 tail's sand manipulation, the 2 tails feline grace, the 3 tails turtle-like shell, and so on around the circle to the 9 tails, whose multiple tails curved protectively around its body. Almost without conscious thought, he placed his hand on the 9 tails carving. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. The pillar illuminated from within, casting the chamber in a blue-white glow that pulsed like a heartbeat. Symbols etched into the stone, invisible until that moment, blazed to life, spiraling up the pillar's length in complex patterns that Naruto recognized as advanced sealing formulas. What did you do? Talia demanded, her hand moving to her hip where, Naruto now noticed, something suspiciously like a lightsaber hilt was partially concealed. Nothing intentional, he replied truthfully. Though he made no move to remove his hand. The connection felt right, like a key finding its lock after centuries of separation. The pillar's glow intensified, and the chamber filled with a GE.NTLE humming that seemed to resonate at a frequency just beyond normal hearing. The air thickened with force energy so concentrated that even non-sensitives would have felt its presence. It's a communication node, Naruto realized, understanding flowing into him through the connection. The Uzuio network extended further than we knew, outposts across multiple systems, connected through these shrines. Connected to what? Ahsoka asked, moving cautiously closer despite the overwhelming energy that filled the room. To each other. To home. Naruto's voice had taken on a distant quality as information flooded his consciousness. This was how scattered communities maintained contact across vast distances, through resonance points calibrated to specific force signatures. Talia stepped forward, her earlier wariness apparently overcome by scholarly interest. You're saying they developed a form of instantaneous communication through the force? Across interstellar distances, Not quite instantaneous, but faster than any mechanical transmission. Naruto's fingers traced the spiraling symbols as they continued to glow. And not just communication, knowledge transfer. History, techniques, warnings. The nine tails stirred within him, its consciousness pressing closer to the surface than usual. Ask it about the fall, the fox suggested with uncharacteristic urgency. About the final days. Following the prompting, Naruto focused his intent through the connection. Show me what happened to Uzuio. The chamber's light shifted, coalescing into a three-dimensional project. Action that filled the space around them. Ghostly images formed. A planet viewed from orbit, its continents arranged in a distinctive spiral pattern. Uzuio, as Naruto remembered it from the historical records he had studied as a child. But the image was not of Uzuio in its prime. As they watched, dark energy spread across the planet's surface like a web of cracks in glass, emanating from a central point where something, the image was too distorted to identify clearly, had impacted. The darkness expanded, consuming entire continents as the planet's very essence seemed to fold inward upon itself. A cataclysm, Talia whispered, her scholarly detachment momentarily broken by the sheer horror of what they were witnessing. The projection shifted again, showing fragments of scenes from the surface, people fleeing, structures collapsing, and most disturbingly, what appeared to be tears in the very fabric of reality opening across the landscape. Through these rifts, darkness poured like liquid shadow, consuming everything it touched. Not a natural disaster, Ahsoka observed, her voice tight. Something weaponized. Naruto's grip on the pillar tightened as recognition dawned. The final sealing technique, he murmured. Used incorrectly, catastrophically incorrectly. The images accelerated, showing the desperate final acts of Uzuio's people, thousands of them channeling energy into massive sealing arrays, attempting to contain the spreading darkness. At the center of the largest array, a child, barely visible amid the swirling energies but unmistakable to Naruto's eyes. Himself. The Nine Tails' voice resonated through his mind with rare gentleness. Now you understand, Kit. It wasn't just me they sealed within you. It was the last hope of Uzuio itself. The projection collapsed suddenly as alarms blared throughout the complex. Red warning lights replaced the pillar's blue glow, and distant sounds of mechanical movement indicated droid forces mobilizing. They detected the energy spike, Ahsoka said, already moving toward the entrance they had used. We need to go. Naruto remained transfixed for a moment longer, his hand still pressed against the saint. One as the final images burned themselves into his memory. Only Talia's firm grip on his shoulder broke his connection. Whatever revelations you're having will have to wait, she said urgently. You fancy explaining them to a droid battalion. The practical wisdom of her words penetrated Naruto's momentary stupor. He withdrew his hand, the pillar's glow fading instantly to dormancy, and followed his companions toward the exit passage. They had barely reached the outer chamber when the distinctive sound of rolling droidekas echoed from the main entrance. Naruto made a split-second decision, changing their direction toward a narrow stairwell he had noticed during their entry, one that appeared to lead upward toward the central platform they had observed from the forest. This way, he directed, taking point as they ascended the ancient steps. We'll have more options in the open. The stairwell wound upward through the structure, occasionally opening into small chambers with artifacts the separatists had evidently deemed less important than the communication pillar. In one such room, Ahsoka paused briefly to download data from a terminal that had been left active, copying files that might provide context for what they had witnessed. They emerged onto the central platform just as rain began to fall again, heavy drops creating ripples across shallow pools that had formed in the carved depressions of the spiral pattern. The open space provided a commanding view of the surrounding forest and mountains, but also left them exposed to the squad of battle droids had just arrived on the platform's opposite side. Intruders detected, announced the lead droid, its mechanical voice carrying through the rain. Surrender or be terminated. Subtle, Naruto muttered, assessing their tactical position. The platform offered minimal cover, but its elevation and the continuing storm provided certain advantages for Force users accustomed to operating in challenging conditions. Talia's hand moved to her hip, and this time she fully drew the weapon Naruto had suspected, a lightsaber hilt of unusual design, weathered and wrapped with material that suggested significant age. She made no move to activate it, however, apparently preferring to maintain whatever cover identity she had established for as long as possible. "We're licensed salvagers," Ahsoka called out, maintaining their cover story. "We have permits for this region." "Negative," the droid responded. "This site is restricted by direct order of Count Dooku. All intruders are to be apprehended for questioning." The mention of Dooku sent a ripple of tension through the group. The Separatist leader's personal interest suggested the site held greater significance than even they had realized. "I don't suppose they'd accept a generous bribe," Naruto suggested under his breath. "Droids aren't known for their corruption," Ahsoka replied dryly. "Then I guess we do this the hard way." Naruto reached into his jacket, fingers closing around a handful of kunai. "On my mark, head for the southeast corner. There's a secondary path down the mountainside." Before either woman could respond, a new voice entered the standoff, cultured, confident, and carrying an unmistakable undercurrent of dark power. "I'm afraid none of you will be leaving quite yet." From behind the droid squad emerged a tall figure draped in black robes. Face partially concealed beneath a hood that did little to mask the aura of malevolence that surrounded him. Even at a distance, the yellow gleam of his eyes was visible, the telltale mark of deep immersion in the dark side. "Sith," Ahsoka whispered, her hand instinctively moving toward her concealed lightsaber. "Not quite," Talia countered softly. "A dark adept, but not fully Sith. One of Dooku's acolytes." The dark figure gestured, and the droids parted to allow him passage to the center of the platform. Rain seemed to avoid him, droplets diverting from their natural paths rather than falling upon his robes. "How interesting," he observed, his gaze moving between the three intruders before settling on Naruto. "When our sensors detected the activation of the artifact, I expected Republic agents. But you," his eyes narrowed, "you're something else entirely, aren't you?" Naruto maintained a neutral expression, though internally he felt the nine tails stirring in response to the dark side presence. "Just a salvager in the wrong place at the wrong time," he replied with deliberate nonchalance. The dark adept laughed, a sound entirely devoid of humor. "A salvager who can activate Uzuio technology with a touch? I think not." He turned slightly to include Ahsoka and Talia in his assessment. "And such interesting companions, a Jedi Padawan, unless I miss my guess, and a Night Sister." "No, something similar but distinct." Talia's posture shifted subtly, her earlier scholarly demeanor replaced by combat readiness. "Your identification skills need work," she said coolly. "Your presence confirms what we suspected," the adept continued, ignoring her comment. "The artifacts are responding to specific genetic or force signatures. How fortunate that you've delivered yourself to us for study." "I've never been much for being studied," Naruto replied, his tone hardening. "Got enough of that at the temple." The admission of his Jedi affiliation seemed to please the adept. "Ah, so the temple knows of Uzuio's legacy. I suspected as much when we intercepted a Jedi team recovering our discarded fragment." He spread his hands in a gesture of mock hospitality. "Come, there's no need for hostility. We seek the same knowledge, do we not? The power of the ancients, free from the dogmatic restrictions of your order." "Knowledge and power aren't the same thing," Naruto countered. "And from what I've seen, you're misinterpreting both." The adept's expression hardened. "A philosophical debate for another time, perhaps. For now, you have a choice. Surrender and share what you know willingly, or be taken by force and have it extracted less pleasantly." Naruto exchanged quick glances with Ahsoka and Talia, a silent communication passing between them. Both women gave almost imperceptible nods, ready to follow his lead. "You know," Naruto said conversationally, "people have been trying to extract things from me my whole life." His hand formed a subtle sign at his side, channeling force energy in preparation. "It never goes well for them." In one fluid motion, he hurled 3 kunai toward the droid squad, not at the dark adept, but at precisely calculated points around him. The specialized weapons embedded themselves in the platform's stone surface, the tags attached to their handles glowing momentarily before detonating. In a synchronized blast that scattered the droids like leaves in a whirlwind. The adept leapt clear of the explosion, dark robes billowing as he ignited a crimson lightsaber. "Kill the women," he ordered the remaining droids. I want this one alive. Ahsoka and Talia needed no further prompting to drop their cover identities. Twin lightsabers ignited, Ahsoka's familiar green blade and Talia's unexpected yellow, as they moved to engage the converging droids. Naruto faced the Dark Adept directly, his own azure lightsaber humming to life. You know, it's really rude to call dibs on opponents when you haven't even introduced yourself. Quote, "You may call me Acolyte Vrost," the dark side user replied, circling with predatory patience. "Soon to be Master Vrost, once I deliver you and your secrets to Count Dooku." Their lightsabers clashed in a blinding flare of energy, the impact sending reverberations through the rain-slick platform. Vrost fought with the precise, elegant form of a trained duelist, Makashi, Naruto recognized. The form favored by Dooku himself. Under normal circumstances, Naruto would have responded with his own unorthodox lightsaber technique, a fusion of traditional Jedi forms with the fluid movements of Uzuio's martial traditions. But instinct told him that revealing too much of his fighting style would give this opponent dangerous insights. Instead, he deliberately adopted a simplified version of Ataru, using its acrobatic elements to maintain distance while assessing the acolyte's capabilities. The rain intensified around them, lightning occasionally illuminating their duel against the darkening sky. Across the platform, Ahsoka moved through the droid ranks with the agility and precision her master was known for, her dual lightsabers creating a defensive perimeter that few blaster bolts penetrated. Talia fought with a style Naruto had never witnessed. Elements of Nightsister techniques blended with traditional lightsaber forms, her yellow blade leaving trails of golden light that lingered momentarily in the air, creating patterns that seemed to confuse the droids' targeting systems. "Impressive companions," Vrost commented as their blades locked momentarily. "The Padawan I understand, but the Witch? An unusual alliance for a Jedi. I collect interesting friends," Naruto replied, breaking the lock with a force-enhanced push that sent them both skidding backward on the wet stone. "Part of my charm." The acolyte's yellow eyes narrowed. "You fight with restraint, afraid to reveal your true abilities. Or perhaps," his free hand made a sharp gesture, and Naruto felt dark side energy coalesce around him. "Perhaps you need proper motivation." The attack came not as lightning or telekinetic force, but as a psychic assault aimed directly at the seal containing the nine tails. Naruto felt it like a spike of ice driven into his mind, seeking the barriers between his consciousness and the fox's. Within his mindscape, the nine tails roared in outrage. He seeks to destabilize the seal. This one knows more than he should. The external evidence of the attack was subtle, a flicker of red energy briefly surrounding Naruto, his eyes shifting momentarily from blue to crimson. But internally, the effect was like a detonation, as the carefully maintained balance between his consciousness and the nine tails wavered. "There it is," Vrost said with evident satisfaction. "The power within you, the beast they speak of in the ancient texts." Naruto staggered, fighting to maintain control as the nine tails' energy surged through his system in response to the assault. His lightsaber flickered and went out as his concentration fractured, the hilt falling from suddenly clawed fingers. "Naruto," Ahsoka called out in alarm, sensing the disturbance in the force even as she continued to battle droids. Vrost pressed his advantage, advancing with lightsaber raised. "Don't fight it," he urged, a fanatic's gleam in his eyes. "Let it emerge. Show me the power of Uzuio's greatest weapon." "It's not a weapon," Naruto ground out, his voice distorting as the nine tails' influence grew stronger. A visible aura of red energy now surrounded him, taking the vague shape of fox-like features, pointed ears, elongated canines, and most distinctively, a single tail of pure force energy that lashed behind him. The transformation alarmed Ahsoka, who had never witnessed anything like it, but Talia reacted with surprising calm, disengaging from her opponents and moving swiftly toward Naruto. Dropping her lightsaber, she placed herself between him and Vrost, her hands forming unfamiliar gestures that generated a barrier of golden light. "Focus on my voice," she instructed Naruto, her tone shifting to something melodic and compelling. "The seal is yours to command, not his to manipulate. Find its center, the spiral's heart." Naruto's consciousness, partially submerged beneath the nine tails' rising influence, latched onto her words. They resonated with teachings he had received long ago, techniques for regaining control when the seal weakened. In his internal mindscape, he visualized the spiral pattern at the center of his being, the complex sealing formula that bound the 9 tails to him while allowing their energies to harmonize. Where Vrost's attack had introduced discordant vibrations, Naruto now re-established the pattern's integrity, tracing each curve and line with mental precision. The fox, sensing his efforts, pulled back its own energy rather than fighting for dominance. Stabilize the connection, Kit. This attack reveals much about our enemy. They know more about Jinchuriki than they should. Externally, Talia maintained her barrier as Vrost assaulted it with his lightsaber, each impact sent ding cascades of sparks across the platform. Whatever you're doing, do it faster, she urged Naruto, strain evident in her voice. This containment field wasn't designed for sustained combat. Naruto's eyes cleared gradually, the crimson receding to reveal his natural blue once more. The visible force aura diminished, and with a deep, centering breath, he regained full control. Thanks, he told Talia, retrieving his lightsaber from where it had fallen. That was unexpected. Explanations later, she replied tersely, dropping the barrier as Naruto stepped forward, ready to re-engage. Vro's T's expression had shifted from triumphant to calculating. Interesting. The witch knows techniques for containing your power. Another piece of the puzzle. He backed away slightly, reassessing the situation as the remaining droids converged to protect him. It seems I underestimated the complexity of this extraction. No matter. We now know you exist, and Dooku will be most interested in acquiring you personally. Before any of them could respond, the platform trembled beneath their feet. Fractures appeared in the ancient stone, spreading outward from the central spiral pattern where pools of rainwater had collected. Destabilizing the seal triggered something in the site itself, Talia realized, her expert's eye assessing the rapidly deteriorating structure. The whole complex is linked through resonance patterns. Vrost reached the same conclusion simultaneously. Fall back, he ordered the droids. Secure the primary artifacts for transport. To the Jedi, he offered a mocking bow. Until our next meeting, I assure you, it will come sooner than you might wish. As he retreated, the platform's deterioration accelerated. Sections began collapsing inward, revealing ancient machinery beneath the ceremonial surface, technology that pulsed with the same blue-white energy Naruto had activated in the pillar below. The whole mountain is a machine, Ahsoka exclaimed, deactivating lightsabers and rushing to Naruto's side. We need to get out of here before it completely destabilizes. Talia had already moved to the platform's edge, assessing potential escape routes as more sections crumbled away. The eastern path is still intact, she called. If we move now, we might outrun the collapse. They sprinted across the disintegrating platform, leaping over widening gaps and sliding down inclined sections as the ancient structure continued its catastrophic failure. Behind them, the central spiral pattern had fully collapsed, revealing a massive chamber beneath that glowed with intensifying energy. The narrow path Talia had identified clung to the mountainside, descending in switchbacks toward the forest below. They had barely reached it when a thunderous explosion rocked the mountain. A column of blue-white energy erupting from the platform they had just abandoned. Keep moving, Naruto urged, taking the lead as loose rocks and debris rained down around them. The path itself was beginning to crumble, sections breaking away behind them as they descended. Ahsoka stumbled as a particularly violent tremor shook the mountain, her foot slipping on the rain-slick stone. Without hesitation, Talia grabbed her arm, preventing her from falling into the growing chasm below. Thanks, Ahsoka gasped, regaining her footing. Consider it professional courtesy, Talia replied with a tight smile. They reached the forest's edge as the mountain behind them gave a final, shuddering groan. The archaeological site collapsed inward upon itself in a cascade of stone and earth. The column of energy flickering briefly before imploding with a concussive force that flattened trees for hundreds of meters in all directions. The shockwave caught them despite their head start, lifting all three from their feet and hurling them deeper into the forest. Naruto managed to twist in midair, positioning himself to absorb the impact against a massive tree trunk rather than allowing his companions to take the brunt of the collision. When the dust and debris settled, they found themselves in a natural hollow formed by the roots of several enormous trees, partially sheltered from the continuing rain. The distant sound of mechanical movement suggested separatist forces regrouping after the catastrophe, but for the moment, they appeared to have escaped pursuit. "Everyone all right?" Naruto asked, wincing slightly as he probed a bruised rib. "Intact," Talia confirmed, though a laceration across her forehead suggested otherwise. "Though I've had more graceful extractions." "What just happened?" Ahsoka demanded, brushing debris from her clothing. "That mountain. It wasn't just ruins, was it?" "No," Naruto agreed solemnly. "It was a node in a network, like the pillar we found. But on a much larger scale. When the resonance pattern destabilized, it triggered a cascade failure." "Triggered by what that dark adept did to you," Ahsoka said, her tone making it a question as much as a statement. Naruto sighed, knowing explanations could no longer be delayed. "He attempted to forcibly access the Nine Tails energy by disrupting my seal. Somehow, he knew enough about Uzuio techniques to target the specific pattern. The seal resonated with the site's own patterns," Talia added, her scholarly knowledge evident despite their circumstances. "These complexes were designed to respond to the energy signatures of specific bloodlines, a security measure to prevent misuse of the knowledge they contained." Ahsoka looked between them, frustration evident in her expression. "Would one of you please explain, in simple terms, what we just witnessed? And," she added, turning to Talia, "who exactly you are? Because those were definitely not standard force techniques you used back there." Talia pressed a cloth to her bleeding forehead, considering her response. "I told you the truth, mostly. I am an independent researcher specializing in force traditions beyond the Jedi-Sith dichotomy. Specifically, I study healing techniques developed by cultures like Uzuio and my own ancestors on Dathomir." "Dathomir." Ahsoka's eyes widened. "You're a Night Sister." "I was raised in their traditions," Talia clarified, "but I left that path to pursue my own understanding of the Force. The Night Sisters use the Force for domination and power. I seek harmony and heal. Which is why I recognized what was happening to you," she added, addressing Naruto directly. "You knew about Jinchuriki," Naruto observed. "About the sealing techniques." Talia nodded. "My research led me to scattered references about Uzuio and their methods of containing cosmic force entities. When the Separatists began excavating this site, I followed, hoping to learn more about techniques that might be adapted for healing purposes." "And the lightsaber?" Ahsoka asked skeptically. "A relic I discovered in my travels," Talia replied, patting the weathered hilt at her hip. "Not all Force users throughout history have been Jedi or Sith, young Padawan. The galaxy is full of traditions your order has forgotten, or deliberately obscured." The subtle criticism wasn't lost on either Jedi, though Naruto found himself more intrigued than offended. His own experiences had taught him that the Jedi Order, for all its wisdom, maintained blind spots about alternative Force traditions. "What about you?" Talia continued, her penetrating gaze fixing on Naruto. "You're not just a Jedi with unusual techniques. You're Uzuio born, aren't you? A true Jinchuriki." "Yes," Naruto admitted, eyeing little point in denial after what she had witnessed. "Though I was very young when Uzuio fell. The Jedi found me afterward and brought me to the temple, where they attempted to retrain you in their traditions," Talia surmised. "How successful was that endeavor?" A wry smile crossed Naruto's face. "Let's just say I remain a work in progress from the Council's perspective." Their conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of approaching vehicles, the distinctive whine of Separatist repulsor lifts cutting through the rain and forest sounds. "They're establishing a search perimeter," Ahsoka warned, her montrals giving her enhanced auditory perception. "Multiple vectors, closing in." Naruto reached a decision. They needed to return to their ship and get off planet with the information they had gathered. And their chances were better with Talia's knowledge and abilities than without them. "We have a ship hidden 8 kilometers west of here," he told Talia. "You're welcome to join us if you'd like to continue this conversation somewhere less actively hostile." Talia considered the offer for only a moment before nodding. "I've learned what I can from this site, which is now mostly a very large crater. And I admit, the opportunity to speak with an actual Jinchuriki is not one I'm eager to pass up." "Then we should move," Ahsoka urged, already orienting herself toward their vessel. "Those patrols will have this sector locked down within the hour." As they moved deeper into the forest, putting distance between themselves and the search parties, Naruto found his thoughts returning to the visions he had witnessed through the communication pillar, the final days of Uzuio, the cataclysm that had consumed his homeworld, and most disturbingly, the implication that he had been at the center of it all. The Nine Tails, unusually subdued since the confrontation, stirred within his mind. The past returns in spirals, Kit, not straight lines. What was hidden will emerge again, for better or worse. You knew, didn't you? Naruto asked internally. About my role in what happened to Uzuio. I knew fragments, ***, the fox admitted. The ceiling was chaotic, desperate. They were attempting something never done before, not just containing me, but preserving the essence of Uzuio itself within a living vessel. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? Or would you have assumed I was manipulating you, as your Jedi masters always warned? The question struck uncomfortably close to truth. For years, Naruto had maintained a close relationship with the entity sealed within him, heeding the Jedi Council's warnings about its potentially corrupting influence. Only recently had that relationship evolved toward something approaching trust. We have a lot to discuss when we're somewhere safer, Naruto concluded, both to the fox and to himself. They traveled through the deepening twilight, the forest's natural sounds gradually replacing the mechanical noises of the search parties as they outpaced their pursuers. Rain continued to fall, though less intensely than before, creating a constant patter against the canopy overhead that helped mask their movement. Ahsoka took point, her natural hunting instincts and force sensitivity allowing her to find the least resistant path through the dense vegetation. Talia moved with similar ease, confirming her familiarity with wilderness environments. Naruto brought up the rear, occasionally creating shadow clones to confuse their trail and misdirect any pursuit. Your Padawan is impressive, Talia observed quietly as they paused at a small stream to reorient themselves. Skywalker trained her well. She's not my Padawan, Naruto corrected, refilling his water container from the stream. No, Talia raised an eyebrow. The way you work together suggested a training bond. We've only just met, actually, Naruto admitted. This is our first mission together. Talia's expression suggested she found this difficult to believe. Interesting. You have a natural compatibility, then. Rare, but not unheard of among Force users. Before Naruto could inquire further about what she meant, Ahsoka rejoined them from her scouting position ahead. We're about 2 kilometers from the ship, she reported. No signs of separatist activity in that direction yet, but they're establishing a perimeter around the entire archaeological zone. We should move quickly. They resumed their journey, maintaining silence as they approached the area where they had landed the spiral shadow. Naruto extended his senses, searching for any indication that their vessel had been discovered, but detected only the ambient life forms of the forest. The clearing came into view, the frightener's weathered hull almost invisible in the growing darkness. They approached cautiously, Ahsoka and Naruto moving in first to secure the perimeter while Talia remained at the forest's edge, alert for pursuit. Looks clear, Ahsoka confirmed after checking the ship's exterior. No signs of tampering or surveillance devices. Naruto nodded, reaching for the remote that would lower the entry ramp. Let's get on board and off this planet before. His words cut short as a distinctive electronic whine filled the air, accompanied by the unmistakable sensation of a tractor beam locking onto their vessel. Above the clearing, clouds parted to reveal a separatist shuttle descending rapidly, its ventral beam projector already active. They tracked the ship's energy signature, Talia realized, rushing from her position to join them. Probably when the mountain complex exploded, the energy surge would have temporarily disrupted any cloaking measures. Can we break free? Ahsoka asked, Alred, why moving toward the entry ramp that had begun to lower in response to Naruto's signal? Not with their tractor beam engaged, he replied grimly. And if we try to take off anyway, they'll just switch to more lethal methods of stopping us. Quote, the separatist shuttle continued its descent, positioning itself directly above the spiral shadow. From its forward compartment, a mounted cannon swiveled to target the Jedi on the ground, a clear warning against resistance. Options, Talia asked tersely, her hand hovering near her lightsaber. Naruto assessed their situation with rapid calculation. Fig. HTING would likely result in the destruction of their ship and possible capture. Surrender wasn't an option given what they now knew about the Separatists' interest in Uzuio techniques. Which left alternative transportation, he decided, reaching into his utility pouch and withdrawing one of his specialized kunai. Both of you, grab hold of me. Now. Ahsoka and Talia moved immediately to his side, each grasping one of his arms as he channeled force energy into the kunai. The blade began to glow with the same blue-white light they had witnessed in the Uzuio complex. What exactly are you? Ahsoka began. But her question transformed into a startled gasp as the world around them seemed to collapse inward, colors and shapes blurring into a momentary vortex of pure sensation. When Elite reasserted itself an instant later, they were no longer in the clearing. Instead, they stood at the base of a massive tree nearly a kilometer away, directly beside another of Naruto's kunai, he had embedded there during their earlier journey as a precautionary marker. What was that? Ahsoka demanded, releasing his arm and staring at him in astonishment. Flying Thunder God technique, Naruto explained, already scanning their new surroundings for potential threats. An Uzuio transportation jutsu. I can instantly move to any location where I've placed a marked kunai. Teleportation. Talia's scholarly interest visibly overcame her surprise. Not force speed or an illusion. Actual displacement through space-time, Naruto confirmed. Though the range is limited, and it requires preparation, I can't just appear anywhere I want. The distant sound of the Separatist shuttle's engines reorienting suggested their disappearance had been noticed. Soon, the search would expand beyond the clearing. We need to move, Naruto decided. There's a trading outpost about 20 kilometers from here. If we can reach it, we might be able to secure alternative transport off-planet. 20 kilometers through Separatist-controlled territory, Ahsoka noted grimly. On foot, in the dark, with search parties likely to be deployed along all major routes. Actually, Talia interjected, I may have a solution to that particular problem. She reached into a concealed pocket of her attire and withdrew a small device, a remote activator of some kind. I didn't arrive on Kyibria without my own contingency plans. Naruto raised an eyebrow. You have a ship? Not exactly, Talia replied with a cryptic smile. But I do have transportation hidden about 3 kilometers from here. If we can reach it, it should provide a faster method of travel than walking. The distant whine of approaching search vehicles made the decision for them. Lead the way, Naruto said, gesturing toward the forest. But be advised, the moment your transportation turns out to be a trap, this partnership ends very abruptly. Talia's smile widened slightly. Prudent caution. I would expect nothing less from a Jinchuriki of Uzuio. She oriented herself, then moved into the forest with confident steps. This way, and do try to keep up. As they followed their enigmatic new ally deeper into the wilderness, Naruto exchanged a glance with Ahsoka. The Padawan's expression conveyed the same mixture of wariness and curiosity he felt himself. Talia Shirel was clearly more than the independent researcher she claimed to be, though whether that made her an asset or a liability remained to be seen. What was certain, however, was that the events at the archaeological site had fundamentally changed their mission. What had begun as a simple investigation into a recovered artifact had evolved into something far more complex, a journey into Naruto's own past, the lost legacy of Uzuio, and the troubling implications of the Separatists' interest in both. The Nine Tails, usually content to observe from the recesses of Naruto's consciousness, remained unusually present, its awareness hovering close to the surface as though anticipating further developments. The Spiral Titans, Kit, it observed cryptically. We approach the center whether we wished or not. With that unsettling thought echoing in his mind, Naruto followed Talia and Ahsoka into the shadows of Kybria's ancient forest, leaving behind the ruins of Uzuio's outpost, and with them, the simple certainties he had maintained about his origins and purpose. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Mandalorian Gambit. You call that a vehicle? Ahsoka's voice carried equal parts disbelief and admiration as she stared at the massive beast emerging from the camouflaged enclosure. The creature, for it was definitely alive, stood nearly 4 meters tall at the shoulder, its 6 muscular legs ending in padded feet the size of dinner plates. Ridged armor plating covered its back and flanks, while a triangular head featured multiple eyes arranged in a pattern that offered near-complete peripheral vision. Most remarkably, intricate patterns had been painted across its natural armor in pigments that shifted color with the creature's breathing. A Dathomirian rancor, Talia explained, approaching the beast with evident familiarity. Modified and trained from birth. Not as fast as a speeder, but considerably more adaptable to rough terrain and completely immune to standard scanner profiles. Naruto circled the creature cautiously, noting the specialized saddle affixed to its back that could accommodate at least 3 riders. "I'm impressed," he admitted. "Though I'm curious how you managed to transport something this size to Kyibria without attracting attention." Talia stroked the rancor's flank in a specific pattern, causing it to lower itself to the ground in a docile crouch. "There are ways to move unusual cargo if you know the right people. The better question is whether your Jedi sensibilities will permit you to ride a creature the Republic classifies as dangerous wildlife." "I grew up riding toads larger than this," Naruto replied with a grin, stepping forward to examine the saddle's configuration. "Though I'll admit, they were somewhat less toothy." The rancor, as if understanding it was being discussed, opened its massive jaw to reveal multiple rows of serrated teeth. The gesture might have been threatening if not for the almost gentle rumble that accompanied it, the creature's equivalent of a greeting. "It's domesticated?" Ahsoka asked, still maintaining a cautious distance. "Kira is as domesticated as any apex predator can be," Talia replied, climbing efficiently onto the saddle. "Which means she obeys specific commands, tolerates riders she recognizes, and generally refrains from eating sentients, unless instructed otherwise." That last qualification did little to reassure Ahsoka, but with separatist search parties closing in, options were limited. She followed Naruto onto the saddle, finding handholds on the specially designed harness. Once they were secured, Talia made a clicking sound accompanied by a subtle hand gesture. The rancor, Kira, rose to its full height with surprising grace and began moving through the forest at a pace that rapidly outstripped what would have been possible on foot. Despite its massive size, the creature navigated between trees with precision, its multiple eyes constantly scanning for obstacles while its sensitive nostrils tested the air for threats. 20 kilometers should take about 2 hours at this pace, Talia informed them, steering with subtle pressure from her knees rather than reins. Kira can maintain this speed through morning if necessary. As they traveled, the dense forest gradually thinned, giving way to rolling hills covered in waist-high grass that rippled like water in the night breeze. Overhead, Kybria's moons cast overlapping shadows that created complex patterns across the landscape, a natural camouflage that helped conceal their movement from aerial surveillance. "I don't mean to sound ungrateful," Naruto said after they had established a comfortable rhythm, "but why exactly are you helping us? You clearly have your own transportation and could have left separately once the separatists showed up." Talia didn't immediately answer, her attention seemingly focused on guiding Kira through a particularly rocky section of terrain. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a measured quality had suggested careful consideration of how much to reveal. "I told you I study Force traditions beyond the conventional Jedi-Sith paradigm," she began. "What I didn't mention is why my people on Dathomir developed techniques for manipulating life energy, what you might call healing. But these methods came with costs, shortened lifespans for the practitioners, mental degradation, sometimes worse." She adjusted their course slightly, guiding Kira toward a shallow stream that would mask their scent trail. "When I discovered references to Uzuio's approach to energy manipulation, I saw potentia for techniques that achieved similar results without the harmful side effects. Harmonization rather than domination of life force. And you believe I have access to this knowledge?" Naruto surmised. "I believe you embody it," Talia corrected. "The Jinchuriki process represents the most advanced form of force harmonization ever developed. A human consciousness in perfect balance with a cosmic entity, neither dominating the other." Ahsoka, who had been listening intently, leaned forward. "But from what we saw at the ruins, something went catastrophically wrong with these techniques on Uzuio." "Precisely." Talia nodded. "Understanding both the technique and its failure is essential. And now that I've seen the Nine Tails energy manifest, even briefly." She glanced back at Naruto. "I am convinced there are applications beyond what either the Jedi or my own people have conceived. The pragmatic honesty of her explanation rang true through the Force, though Naruto sensed she was street ill withholding certain details, not necessarily lying, but framing her motivations selectively. Given their circumstances, it was a level of disclosure he could accept for now. The trading outpost is just beyond that ridge, Talia announced, indicating a dark silhouette against the night sky. We should approach on foot from here. Kira tends to create strong first impressions. They dismounted in the shadow of a rocky outcropping, where Talia issued a complex series of commands to the ranker. The creature settled into a resting position, its armored plates shifting to better blend with the surrounding stone. She'll remain here until I return, Talia explained, retrieving a small pack from the saddle. Now, we need a plan for the outpost. I assume neither of you brought significant funds for purchasing transport. Republic intelligence provided emergency credits, Ahsoka confirmed, patting a concealed pocket in her utility belt. Enough for basic transport, though not enough to by discretion if anyone recognizes us as Jedi. Naruto had been scanning the outpost with enhanced senses, cataloging entry points and security measures. There's a problem, he reported. Separat East forces have already established checkpoints at all entry points. They're scanning identichips and conducting searches. They moved fast, Ahsoka observed grimly. Standard procedure would be to lock down nearby settlements to prevent off-world communication about whatever happened at the archaeological site. So buying passages out, Talia concluded. What about alternative methods? Naruto's expression shifted into something more mischievous. I might have an idea, but it requires creating a significant distraction. By the time they reached the outpost's perimeter, Naruto had outlined his plan. The settlement itself was typical of Outer Rim trading posts, a haphazard collection of prefabricated structures, semi-permanent tents, and the occasional sturdier building constructed from local materials. Several landing pads accommodated various small to medium transport vessels, with a centralized control tower monitoring arrivals and departures. The Separatist presence was immediately evident. Battle droids at each entrance checking identification, scanning equipment deployed at strategic locations, and a command post established near the control tower. While not a full military occupation, it was certainly enough to make casual entry impossible. Those scanners will detect weapons, Ahsoka noted, indicating devices mounted above each checkpoint, including lightsabers, and they'll be actively looking for 2 humans and a Togruta who disappeared from their search grid, Talia added. Which is why none of us are going through the checkpoints, Naruto replied. From his position overlooking the settlement, he focused on a particular vessel docked on the farthest landing pad, a sleek courier ship with minimal crew requirements and more than enough range for their needs. That's our target, Telia's XC-70, hyperspace capable and fast enough to outrun Separatist pursuit ships. And how exactly do we reach it without being detected? Ahsoka asked skeptically. In answer, Naruto formed a familiar hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. With a series of soft popping sounds, 20 perfect duplicates of Naruto appeared, each an autonomous entity capable of independent action. The clones waited silently for instructions, identical expressions of anticipation on their faces. You know what to do, Naruto told them. Maximum confusion, minimum casualties. Standard Uzumaki distraction protocol. The clones grinned in perfect unison before dispersing in different directions, some transforming their appearance with another jutsu to create varied disguises as they moved. Remarkable, Talia murmured, observing the technique with scholarly interest. True physical duplication, not mere force illusions. And they maintain independent consciousness. Each acts independently based on the original's intent, Naruto confirmed. Useful for reconnaissance, combat, and, he gestured toward the settlement, where the first signs of chaos were already emerging, creative problem solving. Across the outpost, small explosions erupted simultaneously at widely separated locations. None were powerful enough to cause significant damage, but the coordinated timing triggered immediate alarm. Battle droids abandoned their checkpoints, rushing toward the disturbances as emergency protocols activated. Meanwhile, several disguised clones had infiltrated the central power distribution hub, where they implemented the second phase of the distraction. With carefully timed sabotage, they triggered a cascading power failure that plunged sections of the outpost in to darkness while overloading others with power surges that caused equipment to malfunction spectacularly. Now, Naruto directed, leading Ahsoka and Talia along a path his clones had secured, a maintenance tunnel that ran beneath the settlement's perimeter and emerged near the landing pads. Separatist forces were now fully engaged with multiple simultaneous crises, their attention diverted from perimeter security. They reached the courier ship without encountering resistance, though the sounds of confusion and alarm throughout the outpost suggested the distraction was working precisely as intended. Ahsoka made quick work of the external access panel, bypassing the vessel's security systems with the specialized slicing tools Republic intelligence had provided. "I'm impressed," she admitted as the entry ramp descended. "Your clones created the perfect balance of chaos without actually harming anyone." "Years of practice," Naruto replied with a hint of pride. "The key is giving people something specific to worry about that isn't you." Once aboard, they moved quickly through the pre-flight sequence. The ship's systems responded smoothly to Ahsoka's expert handling, main drives humming to life with minimal startup signature. "We have company," Talia warned, indicating a squad of battle droids belatedly responding to the unauthorized access alert at the landing pad. "Too late," Naruto observed as Ahsoka engaged the repulsor lifts, lifting the courier ship clear of the pad before the droids could establish a firing position. With a surge of acceleration that pressed them back into their seats, the vessel shot upward into Kybria's night sky. "Separatist vessels are scrambling," Ahsoka reported, monitoring the tactical display. "Two pursuit craft launching from the main garrison. They won't catch us before we reach hyperspace," Naruto assured her, feeding coordinates into the Navi computer. "Though I am curious what happens to your rancor now that we've left the planet." "Kira has her instructions," Talia replied with serene confidence. "She'll return to her transport vessel and enter hibernation until I return or send retrieval commands." The courier ship broke atmosphere, accelerating rapidly toward the jump point Naruto had calculated. Behind them, the separatist pursuit vessels struggled to match their head start, falling gradually further behind as Ahsoka pushed the engines beyond standard safety parameters. "Jump in 3, 2, 1. Naruto counted down, and the stars stretched into starlines as they made the transition to hyperspace. The vessel's interior fell quiet except for the background hum of systems functioning at optimal levels. "Clean getaway," Ahsoka declared with satisfaction, running a diagnostic to ensure their hasty depth. Ardor hadn't damaged any critical systems. "Though I'm not sure the owner of this ship will appreciate our borrowing it." "The Telia Corporation has excellent insurance," Talia noted dryly. "And the IR ties to separatist shipping make them a legitimate target under Republic military protocols." Naruto leaned back in his seat, finally allowing himself to relax slightly now that immediate danger had passed. "We need to report to the Council," he said, more to Ahsoka than Talia. "What we discovered on Kyibria changes everything about this mission." "Agreed," Ahsoka replied, setting the autopilot before turning to face him. "Though I'm not sure how to explain our new traveling companion." She gestured toward Talia, who merely raised an eyebrow in response. "The Council's concerns are secondary to the immediate threat," Talia stated matter-of-factly. "If Count Dooku is actively pursuing Uzuio sealing techniques, we don't have time for committee debates about my credentials." "She has a point," Naruto acknowledged. "And she did save us back there, both from Vrost and from being captured at the outpost." Ahsoka frowned slightly but nodded. "Fine, but we should at least check in with Master Kenobi. He's coordinating this mission and needs to know what we've found, and that the Separatists now have a special interest in you specifically." Naruto moved to the communication station, encoding a secure transmission to Coruscant. After several moments of static, a blue hologram of Obi-Wan Kenobi materialized above the projector. "Naruto," the Jedi Master greeted him, relief evident in his tone. "We've been attempting to contact you since detecting a massive energy surge in your region of Kyibria. I take it things didn't go entirely according to plan." "You could say that," Naruto replied with a rueful smile. "The archaeological site was definitely Uzuio in origin, an outpost connected to a larger network. But the Separatists were waiting for us, led by one of Dooku's ACOLYTES who knew far too much about Uzuio sealing techniques." He proceeded to summarize their discoveries and subsequent escape, introducing Talia as a cultural specialist who had assisted them, A.D. A liberate understatement that Ahsoka noted with a slight narrowing of her eyes but didn't contradict. Obi-Wan stroked his beard thoughtfully as he absorbed the information. This confirms our worst fears. Dooku isn't just studying these artifacts out of academic interest, he's actively seeking to weaponize the techniques they describe. There's more, Naruto continued. Based on what we witnessed and the data Ahsoka recovered, we believe the Separatists may have found references to additional Uzuio outposts. They're searching for a complete set of instructions for the sealing techniques. Do we know where they might look next? Obi-Wan asked. That's where things get interesting, Naruto replied, gesturing to Talia. Our specialist has a theory. Talia stepped forward, her scholarly persona now fully engaged. The data fragments indicate a dispersal pattern for Uzuio knowledge, key components of their most powerful techniques deliberately separated and hidden at different outposts. Based on symbolic references in the texts, I believe the next fragment would be located somewhere associated with iron and fire. That hardly narrows it down, Obi-Wan observed dryly. Except that the reference specifically uses the Uzuio term, Tetsu Mandalore, iron of the soul, Naruto explained. There's only one system I know of with that particular linguistic connection. Understanding dawned on Obi-Wan's face. Mandalore. Precisely, Talia confirmed, and if my analysis is correct, the Separatists will have reached the same conclusion. Obi-Wan's expression grew troubled. Quote, Mandalore presents significant complications. The planet maintains strict neutrality in the war, and Duchess Satine would view any Republic military presence, including Jedi on official business, as a violation of their sovereignty. Then we don't go as Jedi, Naruto suggested. We go as private individuals with an interest in Mandalorian antiquities. There's enough black market trade in cultural artifacts that we wouldn't stand out among legitimate collectors and researchers. Risky, Obi-Wan cautioned, but potentially workable. I'll consult with the council and arrange appropriate credentials and resources. In the meantime, proceed to Mandalore but maintain absolute discretion. If the Separatists are indeed pursuing the same target, any confrontation must occur well away from public view. Understood, Naruto agreed. We'll contact you again once we've established a base of operations on Mandalore. After the transmission ended, the three sat in contemplative silence, each considering the implications of their next destination. Mandalore's complex political situation made it simultaneously an ideal hiding place for ancient artifacts and an extremely dangerous environment for covert operations. I should mention, Talia said eventually, that I have certain contacts within Mandalorian society who might prove useful. Though activating these connections would require revealing more about my background than I've shared thus far. I think we're well past the point of maintaining covers with each other, Naruto replied. Especially if we're headed into Mandalorian territory. Talia nodded, her violet eyes reflecting calculations behind them. My full name is Talia Shirel, formerly of the Night Sisters of Dathomir, currently unaffiliated practitioner of what some call Grey Force traditions. My studies have taken me to Mandalore several times, where I've established connections with certain clans who value medical knowledge that doesn't rely on modern technology. Mandalorians working with a Force user? Ahsoka questioned skeptically. They're not exactly known for their fondness of Jedi or anything related to the Force. The traditional clans distinguish between Jedi, whom they consider political operatives of the Republic, and those who use the Force for purposes that align with Mandalorian values, Talia explained. Healing battle wounds without technology that might fail in field conditions, for instance, is a skill they pragmatically appreciate. Which clans are we talking about? Naruto inquired, knowing that Mandalorian internal politics were notoriously complex and faction-driven. Clan Kyibria, primarily, Talia answered. They maintain traditions of the ancient Mandalorians while avoiding entanglement in the conflict between Death Watch and the new Mandalorians. Their current leadership values knowledge and strength equally. Naruto exchanged a glance with Ahsoka. Having an introduction to a traditional clan could be invaluable, especially if we need to operate outside the official channels of Sundari. I agree, Ahsoka said, though her tone suggested continued reservations. But we should be clear about expectations. This is still a Jedi mission, regardless of what cover we adopt. Of course, Talia conceded smoothly. I merely offer resources that might otherwise be inaccessible. The decisions remain yours. The journey to Mandalore would take approximately 14 hours through hyperspace, providing time for rest and more detailed planning. They established a rotation for monitoring the ship's systems, Ahsoka taking the first shift while Naruto and Talia sought what rest they could in the vessel's small crew quarters. Alone in the courier ship's compact meditation space, Naruto finally had opportunity for uninterrupted communion with the Nine Tails. Within his mindscape, he stood before the massive gate that represented the seal, the fox's glowing eyes regarding him with ancient wisdom. Mandalore. The Nine Tails rumbled thoughtfully. An interesting choice for hiding Uzuio knowledge. But it makes sense, Naruto replied, pacing the watery floor of the mental construct. Mandalorians value strength and honor above all. They would respect the power contained in the techniques while understanding the responsibility of safeguarding them. Perhaps, the fox acknowledged. Though, I question whether your new ally reveals her true purpose in seeking these artifacts. Talia, Naruto considered the enigmatic Force user. She's definitely holding back information, but her interest in healing techniques seems genuine. I sense no deception there. Not deception, Kit, omission. The Night Sisters train their young thoroughly in the art of telling partial truths. You think she has another agenda? Everyone has another agenda, the fox observed with ancient cynicism. Even your Jedi Council, even you, though you may not recognize it yet. The cryptic statement gave Naruto pause. What do you mean? You seek these artifacts for knowledge, yes. But also for connection. To understand your origins, your purpose. To answer the question that has haunted you since the temp. La took you in. Why were you the one who survived? The observation struck uncomfortably close to truth. While the mission's official parameters focused on preventing separatist acquisition of dangerous knowledge, Naruto couldn't deny the personal stake he felt in uncovering Uzuio's legacy. Is that wrong? He asked quietly. Neither wrong nor right, Kit. Merely human. But be aware of it, less. It cloud your judgment when difficult choices arise. With that parting wisdom, the fox receded deeper into the mindscape, leaving Naruto to contemplate the complex motivations driving each member of their unlikely alliance as they hurtled through hyperspace toward Mandalore and whatever secrets awaited them there. Mandalore's distinctive spherical shape grew larger in the viewscreen as their appropriated courier ship descended from orbit. The planet's surface, once verdant forests and oceans before ancient wars reduced it to windswept deserts, gleamed with the peculiar metallic quality that resulted from generations of adaptive terraforming. Most striking was the massive domed city of Sundari, capital of the new Mandalorian government, its geometric architecture visible even from high altitude. We'll avoid the main spaceport, Naruto decided, reviewing their approach options. Too many security protocols, and the Duchess's guards are thorough. There's a trading outpost in the northern hemisphere, Talia suggested, indicating coordinates on the navigation display. Clan Kyibria maintains a presence there. We can secure ground transportation and credentials for accessing Sundari if necessary. Ahsoka, who had changed from her Jedi attire into more nondescript civilian clothing, studied the planetary data with strategic assessment. What exactly are we looking for once we arrive? Iron and fire. Isn't much to go on. The reference likely indicates a location sacred to traditional Mandalorians, Talia explained. Places where Beskar was first forged, are sites of significant historical battles. The challenge will be identifying which one might contain an Uzuio artifact without alerting the separatists to our interest. Naruto adjusted their approach vector, Usin. The planet's electromagnetic field to minimize their sensor profile, a technique he had perfected during previous covert missions. I suggest we start by gathering information rather than immediately searching. Mandalorians respect directness, but they're suspicious of outsiders asking too many specific questions about their cultural heritage. The outpost Talia had identified appeared on the horizon as they completed their descent, a collection of durasteel structures arranged in concentric rings around a central marketplace. Unlike the elegant modernity of Sundari, this settlement embraced traditional Mandalorian aesthetic. Angular architecture reinforced for defense, minimal ornamentation except for clan symbols, and multiple watchtowers monitoring the surrounding desert. Welcome to Vet Outpost, Talia announced as they landed on a peripheral pad that required no formal clearance. named for an ancient Mandalorian commander who established it as a trading post for clans who fared distance from centralized authority, a tradition that continues to this day. They disembarked into dry heat that immediately parched the throat, the air carrying fine particles of desert sand that glittered like gold dust in the harsh sunlight. Naruto squinted against the glare, adjusting his perception to the dramatically different environment from Kybria's lush forests. First priority is securing local currency and information, he directed, falling easily into the role of team leader despite the mission's increasingly improvisational nature. Talia, you mentioned contacts. How quickly can you arrange an introduction? Give me an hour, she replied, surveying the settlement with practiced eyes. Meet me at the central cantina when the second sun reaches its peak. And try to avoid looking too Republic. With that advice, she departed toward the eastern quarter of the outpost, her stride projecting confident familiarity with the environment that would discourage casual eye interference from the armored figures who watched all newcomers with inherent suspicion. I'm not sure if I trust her, Ahsoka admitted once Talia was beyond earshot. She's been helpful, but her motivations remain conveniently aligned with ours while revealing very little about her own goals. I know, Naruto acknowledged. But right now, her knowledge of both the artifacts and Mandalorian culture makes her our best asset. We'll maintain awareness of potential complications. They spent the next hour familiarizing themselves with the outpost's layout, exchanging Republic credits for local currency at rates that would have offended financial administrators on Coruscant, and carefully observing the social dynamics that governed interaction. Unlike the cosmopolitan atmosphere of most trading centers, Vet Outpost maintained a distinctly Mandalorian character. Most residents wore at least portions of traditional armor, weapons were carried openly, and conversations in Mando outnumbered basic by a significant margin. At the appointed time, they entered the central cantina, a sturdy structure with surprisingly sophisticated acoustic design that allowed dozens of separate conversations to occur without overlapping. The clientele represented various Mandalorian clans, identifiable by distinctive armor colors and sigils, along with a smaller number of off-worlders who maintained respectful demeanors appropriate to guests in someone else's territory. Talia awaited them at a corner table, deep in conversation with a Mandalorian whose armor bore the distinctive dark blue and silver pattern of Clan Kyibria. As they approached, both looked up with expressions suggesting interrupted business. My friends, Talia greeted them with practiced casualness. Allow me to introduce Torian Kyibria, field commander for his clan's security operations and someone who appreciates the value of cultural knowledge. The Mandalorian assessed them with the calculating gaze of a professional warrior. Taking note of how they carried themselves, the concealed weapons they thought were hidden, and a dozen other details that informed threat assessment. Finally, apparently satisfied, he nodded once. Talia speaks highly of your discretion, he said, his basic carrying the distinctive cadence of someone who thought in Mandoa. Says you seek knowledge about old connections between star systems. Before the Republic's current borders. That's right, Naruto confirmed, recognizing the oblique reference to their actual purpose. Particularly trading relationships involving specialized crafting techniques. The exchange of knowledge between cultures. Torian's expression remained neutral, but something in his posture suggested approval of the diplomatic phrasing. Many outsiders come seeking Mandalorian secrets. Most leave disappointed, or don't leave at all. We respect boundaries, Ahsoka assured him, adopting the direct communication style Mandalorians preferred. Our interest is specific and historical, not current military applications. Perhaps, Torian allowed, yet timing is interesting. Others ask similar questions recently. Offworlders with connections to separatist interests. Though they disguise it poorly. Naruto and Ahsoka exchanged glances. The separatists had indeed reached the same conclusion about Mandalore's connection to the artifacts. How recently? Naruto inquired. 3 rotations passed, Torian answered. Claimed to be private collectors seeking Mandalorian war relics. Offered significant credits for access to clan historical sites. When refused, they became insistent. The implications were clear. Separatist agents were already operating on Mandalore, likely employing increasingly aggressive tactics to locate the artifact fragment. What happened to these collectors? Ahsoka asked. A cold smile touched Torian's features. Mandalorian hospitality has limits. They were escorted from clan territories with clear instruction not to return. Whether they heeded this wisdom remains unknown. We would value the opportunity to examine historical sites with potential cross-cultural influences, Naruto stated, returning to their primary objective. Particularly those associated with traditional forging techniques or ancient battle sites. Torian studied him for a long moment before responding. Clan Kyibria holds annual combat trials beginning tomorrow. Vergoten challenges where young warriors prove their readiness for clan responsibilities. Outsiders sometimes participate as a matter of honor or alliance building. Victory earns respect and certain privileges, including access to clan historical knowledge. It was an unexpected opening, though one fraught with potential complications. Mandalorian combat trials were notorious for their brutality, often resulting in serious injury even when not explicitly lethal. What form do these trials take? Ahsoka inquired, her tone suggesting professional interest rather than concern. 3 stages, Torian explained. Precision with ranged weapons, tactical problem solving, and finally, hand-to-hand combat without energy weapons. Lethal force is permitted but not required. Victory can be achieved through submission or incapacitation. Naruto considered the offer carefully. Participating would certainly expedite their access to potential artifact locations, but would also place them under intense scrutiny from traditional Mandalorians, people trained from childhood to detect weakness and exploit it. I would be honored to participate, he decided, recognizing that among Mandalorians, accepting physical challenge was the most direct path to establishing respect. Torian nodded with evident satisfaction. Expected nothing less, given Talia's description of your abilities. Registration closes at sunset. 3 participants maximum from any visiting group. After finalizing arrangements and receiving directions to the trial grounds, Torian departed with the efficient movements of someone perpetually aware of optimal use of time. Once alone, Naruto turned to Talia with a raised eyebrow. You neglected to mention combat trials as our entry method. She shrugged unapologetically. Would it have changed your decision to come here? Besides, I only confirmed the timing when I spoke with Torian earlier. The trials happen annually. Fortunate timing for our purposes. Are suspiciously convenient, Ahsoka muttered. Regardless, Naruto interjected before the tension could escalate. It's our best option for accessing the information we need without arousing additional suspicion. The question is who participates. You, obviously, Talia replied. Your combat capabilities are best suited for Mandalorian expectations. I would suggest I take the Secon D position. My knowledge of traditional medicine will earn respect among the clans, regardless of performance in the combat portions. And I'll maintain a lower profile, Ahsoka concluded, seeing the logic. Focus on intelligence gathering while you two draw attention through the competition. The plan established, they secured modest accommodations in the outpost's visitor quarter, a single room, with basic amenities that reinforced their cover as researchers of limited means. As twilight approached, Naruto and Talia made their way to the registration area for the trials while Ahsoka began methodically exploring the outpost's information networks. The registration process proved straightforward if somewhat archaic by galactic standards. Names recorded in a physical ledger, entry fees Pi D in metal currency rather than digital transfer, and a blood sample taken from each participant, ostensibly for medical purposes, though Naruto suspected it served additional verification functions in Mandalorian society where bloodlines carried significant weight. 73 participants, the registrar announced as she completed their entry. Combat brackets will be determined by traditional sorting, strength of clan first, then individual standing. As non-Mandalorians, you'll be positioned according to your sponsor's status. Our sponsor? Naruto questioned. Clan Kyibria stands for you, the woman clarified, indicating Torian's signature on their registration. Without clan sponsorship, outsiders cannot participate. It also means any dishonor you bring reflects upon them, a significant responsibility. The implied warning was clear. Their performance would affect not only their mission but potentially Clan Kyiberia's standing among its peers. Mandalorian society took such matters of honor with deadly seriousness. As they departed the registration area, Talia led them toward the outpost's western edge, where preparations for the trials were already underway. Temporary struck. Churish had been erected around a central arena, with specialized areas for each trial stage. Mandalorians from various clans moved purposefully through the grounds, inspecting equipment, establishing boundaries, and engaging in the ritualistic preparations that preceded important cultural events. The trials begin at dawn, Talia explained as they observed from a respectful distance. Traditionally, participants spend the night in meditation or final preparations rather than comfort. Will Ahsoka be able to watch? Naruto asked, considering potential intelligence opportunities during the event. Spectators are welcome, encouraged. Even Mandalorians believe performance improves when witnessed by others. Talia's expression turned more serious. But there's something you should know before tomorrow. The trials often attract significant attention from across Mandalorian society, including representatives from Sundari who report directly to the Duchess, political observers, and potential recruiters for the various factions, she confirmed. Your performance will be evaluated not just as a fighter, but as a potential ally or threat to Mandalorian interests. It's an opportunity for intelligence gathering on both sides. Quote, as darkness fell over the outpost, they returned to their accommodations where Ahsoka awaited with preliminary findings from her reconnaissance. The separatist collectors made quite an impression, she reported, activating a small holoprojector that displayed security footage from various locations around the outpost. They visited multiple clan representatives, focusing specifically on those with historical connections to ancient forging sites. The footage showed 3 figures, 2 humans and an Emodian, whose body language and interaction patterns suggested military training beneath civilian attire. Their systematic approach to information gathering appeared professional and well-researched. They were specifically asking about a site called Vergoran Forge, Ahsoka continued. Apparently an ancient facility where some of the first Beskar armor was created, located in the mountains roughly 100 kilometers northeast of here. The Iron Heart, Talia translated thoughtfully. It aligns with the iron and fire reference in the Uzuio texts. Did they visit the site? Naruto asked, studying the footage for behavioral cues that might reveal additional information. Unknown, Ahsoka replied. They secured transport and supplies for a multi-day expedition but never returned to the outpost. According to local gossip, they encountered traditional Mandalorian hospitality when approaching clan-protected territories without proper authorization. Which could mean anything from polite redirection to permanent disappearance, Talia observed dryly. Either way, Naruto concluded, the Vergoran Forge seems like our most promising lead. The question is how to secure legitimate access. Win tomorrow's trials, Talia suggested simply. Victory grants the right to request specific knowledge as reward, a tradition dating back centuries in Mandalorian culture. As they finalized preparations for the following day's challenges, Naruto found himself reflecting on the complex interplay of cultures their mission had revealed. The Uzuio practitioners, his ancestors, had evidently understood something profound about Mandalorian society that led them to entrust a fragment of their most precious knowledge to these warriors. Not merely for safekeeping, but perhaps because they recognized a philosophical alignment deeper than surface appearances would suggest. Both cultures valued strength, yet defined it beyond mere physical power. Both maintained traditions that outsiders often misunderstood or dismissed as primitive. And both had suffered catastrophic losses that transformed their societies while preserving core principles that defined their identity. You see the connection, the Ninetales observed in his mind as Naruto prepared for sleep. Why Uzuio would trust Mandalorians with secrets they kept from the Jedi Order. They respect boundaries, Naruto replied internally. The concept that knowledge belongs to those who created it, not to be claimed by others who deem themselves more enlightened. A philosophy your Jedi masters might benefit from considering, the fox noted with characteristic acerbity. With that thought lingering in his consciousness, Naruto settled into the light meditative trance that served him as rest before challenging days. Tomorrow would test not only his combat skills, but his ability to navigate the complex cultural landscape of a society that viewed outsiders with inherent suspicion, particularly those who showed interest in their most guarded traditions. Dawn broke over Vet Outpost in a spectacular display of amber and crimson that painted the desert landscape in fiery hues. By the time the first sun crested the horizon, hundreds of Mandalorians had gathered at the trial grounds, participants preparing with methodical efficiency, spectators establishing themselves in viewing areas, and clan elders convening in a raised pavilion that of fared commanding views of all three trial arenas. Naruto and Talia arrived early, dressed in practical attire suitable for combat while carefully avoiding any insignia or colors that might suggest Republic affiliation. Ahsoka accompanied them to the participant assembly area before taking her position among the spectators, her mission to observe and gather intelligence while maintaining a low profile. "Remember," Talia advised quietly as they awaited the formal commencement, "Mandalorians respect skill and courage above all. Show both, regardless of whether you win or lose." "Planning to win," Naruto replied with a confident smile that masked the strategic calculations already running through his mind. While victory would certainly expedite their mission, he needed to balance performance against revealing too much of his unique abilities, particularly with so many observant warriors present. A ceremonial horn blast signaled the beginning of proceedings. A Mandalorian elder stepped forward, resplendent in ancient armor that bore the marks of actual combat rather than ceremonial decoration. When he spoke, his voice carried effortlessly across the assembly without technological amplification, the practiced projection of a battlefield commander. "Today we honor the way of the Mandalore," he began in Mandoa before switching to basic for the benefit of off-world participants. "Through challenge, we discover worth. Through combat, we reveal truth. Through victory or honorable defeat, we strengthen the clans." The formal invocation complete, he gestured toward the first trial arena, a sophisticated range where targets of varying sizes and distances had been arranged in complex configurations. "The first trial tests precision and adaptability," he announced. "Each participant will engage 15 targets with standard Mandalorian weapons. Scoring reflects accuracy, speed, and tactical judgment." Participants were divided into groups of 10, with Naruto and Talia assigned to separate cohorts based on their registration order. As Naruto awaited his group's turn, he observed the proceedings with careful attention to both technical requirements and cultural nuances. The weapons provided were traditional Mandalorian designs, compact slug throwers rather than blasters, requiring compensation for gravity and wind factors that energy weapons ignored. Targets activated in unpredictable sequences, forcing participants to constantly reassess priorities and adjust firing positions. Most significantly, certain targets represented civilian silhouettes that, if engaged, resulted in substantial penalty points, a test of judgment embedded within the technical challenge. When Naruto's group was called forward, he accepted the unfamiliar weapon with appropriate respect, testing its weight and balance briefly before taking his position. The Mandalorian judge provided minimal instruction: engage targets as they activate. You have one power cell containing 25 projectiles. Begin when ready. Naruto centered himself with a deep breath, extending his awareness through the Force without the obvious external signs that would identify him as a Jedi. When he opened his eyes, the world had slowed perceptibly, details sharpening as his enhanced senses processed information at accelerated rates. The first target activated, a small silhouette representing an armed combatant at extreme range. Naruto fired with calculated precision, accounting for the weapon's unfamiliar recoil pattern and the subtle crosswind that affected ballistic trajectories. The projectile struck center mass, triggering acknowledgement lights and the immediate activation of 3 additional targets. What followed was a demonstration of kinesthetic precision that drew murmurs of appreciation from observing Mandalorians. Naruto moved with fluid economy between firing positions, never wasting motion or ammunition, each shot placed with deliberate intent rather than hopeful approximation. More impressive was his target discrimination, instantly recognizing and avoiding civilian silhouettes while prioritizing threats based on tactical logic rather than convenience. When the final target deactivated, Naruto had expended exactly 15 projectiles for 15 legitimate targets, maintaining perfect accuracy while completing the course in the third fastest time recorded that morning. He returned the weapon to the judge with a respectful nod, neither celebrating his performance nor affecting false modesty. Talia, when her group was called, demonstrated different but equally impressive skills. Where Naruto had relied on speed and precision, she employed patience and strategic positioning, using terrain features to optimize firing angles and conserve energy. Her final score placed her comfortably in the upper quartile of participants, respectable without drawing undue attention. Well executed, Torian commented when they reconvened between trials. Particularly your ammunition conservation. Many waste shots through eagerness or uncertainty. The weapon was unfamiliar, Naruto acknowledged, but the principles remain constant across systems. This simple statement carried cultural significance beyond its literal meaning, an acknowledgement of universal truths that transcended specific technologies or traditions. Torian's approving nod suggested the philosophical implication had been recognized and appreciated. The second trial presented a more complex challenge, tactical problem solving under pressure. Participants faced a constructed environment representing urban terrain with multiple objectives, defended by training droids programmed with Mandalorian combat protocols. Success required not merely defeating opponents, but achieving specific goals with minimum resource expenditure. This stage evaluates your strategic thinking, the judge explained. Complete all objectives within the time limit using only the equipment provided. Excessive force or collateral damage results in penalty points. Naruto's group entered the challenge area, a maze-like configuration of walls, barriers, and multi-level structures that created a three-dimensional battle space. Each participant received identical equipment, basic armor components, non-lethal weapons, minimal medical supplies, and a datapad containing objective parameters. The objectives themselves are: reflected Mandalorian priorities, secure a designated command point, extract a simulated hostage, recover specific intelligence materials, and neutralize a fortified position, all while conserving RCES and minimizing hypothetical civilian casualties. When the commencement signal sounded, most participants immediately engaged the nearest opposition or moved toward obvious objectives. Naruto, however, took a different approach. Rather than rushing forward, he spent precious seconds analyzing the entire battlespace from his starting position, identifying patterns in droid deployments and environmental mental features that others overlooked in their haste. What followed was a masterclass in asymmetric tactics. Rather than confronting superior forces directly, Naruto manipulated droid behavior through calculated diversions, drawing units away from critical positions before circling back to achieve objectives with minimal engagement. Where combat proved necessary, he employed precision strikes against vulnerabilities specific to the droid models, knowledge that suggested extensive previous experience with similar units. Most impressively, he adapted Mandalorian techniques observed during earlier participants' attempts, demonstrating both respect for their tactical doctrine and innovation in its application. This cultural awareness, combined with undeniable effectiveness, earned grudging appreciation from even the most traditional observers. Naruto completed the course with all objectives achieved, using less than half his allotted resources and finishing with the second best time in his group. As he exited the challenge area, he noted increased attention from the clan leader's pavilion. His performance had apparently warranted closer observation. Talia's approach to the same challenge proved complementary but distinct. Where Naruto had employed speed and misdirection, she utilized patience and environmental manipulation. By carefully adjusting terrain features and exploiting weaknesses in droid programming, she achieved objectives through minimal direct confrontation, a strategy that earned technical points while demonstrating an alternative philosophy of resource conservation. By midday, the field of participants had narrowed considerably. Those who failed either trial were eliminated with ceremonial acknowledgement of their effort but no consolation for inadequate performance, a reflection of Mandalorian cultural values that viewed challenge as inherently valuable regardless of outcome. The remaining participants, now fewer than 30, gathered for the final most significant trial, hand-to-hand combat in paired elimination matches. Unlike the previous stages, which tested technical skills and tactical thinking, this challenge evaluated the qualities Mandalorians valued most: courage, adaptability, and the capacity to function effectively under genuine threat. The final trial is simple in concept, complex in execution, the Elder announced. Victory through submission, incapacitation, or ring out. No energy weapons permitted, but traditional blades and armor components are allowed. Combat continues until resolution is achieved. There is no time limit. The matching algorithm paired participants based on performance in previous trials, creating contests between those of similar demonstrated capability. When the brackets appeared on the central display, Naruto found himself matched against a Mandalorian from Clan Vizsla, a traditionally aggressive house known for exceptional close combat specialists. Challenging opponent, Torian observed, approaching as participants prepared for their matches. Vizsla trains exclusively in the traditional Mandalorian martial forms. Very few outsiders have studied counters to these techniques. I look forward to the education, Naruto replied with genuine enthusiasm rather than bravado. The opportunity to experience traditional Mandalorian combat firsthand represented valuable knowledge regarding L.S. of the mission's specific objectives. Talia had drawn an equally formidable opponent, a female Mandalorian from Clan Awad whose specialized armor modifications suggested expertise in grappling techniques designed to neutralize conventional advantages of strength or speed. The combat arena itself reflected Mandalorian pragmatism, a circular space 30 meters in diameter, the ground composed of packed earth with scattered patches of uneven terrain that prevented predictable footing. No barriers or obstacles provided convenient cover. This was to be direct confrontation without tactical evasion. As preliminary matches began, Naruto and Talia observed their future opponents with professional assessment. The Vizsla warrior fought with disciplined aggression, employing a distinctive style that combined striking techniques optimized for armored combat with joint manipulations designed to exploit vulnerabilities in opponent defenses. Most telling was his efficiency, no wasted movement or performative displays. Only the relentless application of proven methods. He's good, Naruto acknowledged, but predictable within his system. His responses follow traditional patterns that can be anticipated once identified. Don't underestimate tradition, Talia cautioned. These techniques have been refined through generations of actual combat, not theoretical training. When Naruto's match was called, he entered the arena with composed readiness, carrying only a single traditional knife as permitted by the rules. His opponent, fully armored except for his helmet, carried both knife and the distinctive metal gauntlets that characterized Vizsla's fighting style. They circled each other with measured steps, each assessing stance, movement patterns, and potential weaknesses. The Mandalorian broke the tension first, launching a combination of strikes designed to test Naruto's defensive reactions without fully committing to an attack vector. Naruto responded with precisely calculated evasions rather than blocks, allowing the attacks to miss by minimal margins while conserving energy and revealing little about his own capabilities. This defensive efficiency visibly surprised his opponent, who had clearly expected either direct opposition or retreating movement rather than the economy of motion Naruto displayed. The crowd's initial conversation faded into attentive silence as the unusual dynamic unfolded. Most combat matches followed predictable escalation patterns, testing exchanges building toward committed engagement. This match, however, demonstrated a more subtle, psychological dimension as each combatant sought to draw the other into preferred tactical ranges. After several inconclusive exchanges, the Mandalorian adjusted his approach, employing a classic Vizsla technique known as the breaking wave, a series of alternating attacks designed to create false openings that lured opponents into compromised positions. It was a sophisticated strategy that had defeated countless opponents unfamiliar with its subtle manipulations. Naruto recognized the pattern immediately, having observed it during earlier matches. Rather than falling for the deception or retreating defensively, he employed a counter that no one present could have anticipated. He mirrored the technique perfectly, matching the Mandalorian's movements with such precise synchronization that it nullified the strategy's effectiveness. A murmur of surprise rippled through the observers. The breaking wave was considered proprietary to Clan Vizsla, its specific mechanics guarded from outsiders. For Naruto to execute it with such precision suggested either previous exposure to closely held clan techniques or an extraordinary capacity for real-time analysis and adaptation. The Mandalorian hesitated momentarily, his rhythm disrupted by the unexpected counter. In that fractional opening, Naruto transitioned from mirroring to initiative, executing a fluid combination that incorporated elements of traditional Jedi unarmed combat with techniques unique to his Uzuio heritage. The resulting exchange happened almost too quickly for untrained observers to follow, a series of strikes, parries, and positional adjustments that culminated in a decisive moment where Naruto redirected his opponent's forward momentum into an unbalanced trajectory. As the Mandalorian struggled to recover his footing, Naruto completed the technique with a precise strike to a nerve cluster beneath the armor joint, a point that caused temporary motor dysfunction without permanent damage. The Mandalorian dropped to one knee, his right arm temporarily non-responsive. Though clearly surprised by the effectiveness of the strike, he immediately attempted to compensate with his remaining functional limbs, a tase. Testament to the resilience Mandalorian training instilled, Naruto allowed his opponent this opportunity to recover rather than pressing his advantage to immediate conclusion. The choice was deliberate, a demonstration of respect rather than mercy, acknowledging the warrior's skill and determination while establishing clear combat superiority. The fight continued for several more exchanges, each demonstrating Naruto's tactical adaptability as he incorporated elements of his opponent's style into his own responses, not mockingly, but with evident appreciation for their effectiveness. When he finally executed the winning sequence, a sophisticated combination that culminated in an unbreakable control position, the victory felt earned rather than inevitable. "I yield," the Mandalorian declared without hesitation once his position became untenable, honoring the tradition of acknowledging superior technique rather than struggling against established outcome. Naruto immediately released the submission hold and offered his hand in the traditional Mandalorian gesture of post-combat respect. "You fight with honor," he said in carefully pronounced Mandoa, using one of the few phrases he had learned in preparation for this mission. The gesture and linguistic effort earned appreciative nods from observing clan members, a small but significant cultural acknowledgement that carried weight beyond mere spectator approval. Talia's match, which followed shortly after, demonstrated a completely different approach to combat effectiveness. Where Naruto had displayed technical mastery and adaptation, she employed subtle manipulation of perception and balance, techniques that seemed to blur the boundary between physical combat and force application without crossing into obvious telekinesis or oath. Abilities that would identify her as a trained force user. Her victory, while less physically dominant than Naruto's, showed equally impressive technical sophistication. By consistently redirecting her opponent's energy and creating compounding positional disadvantages, she gradually established a situation where submission became the only logical option despite neither combatant sustaining significant damage. As the trial progressed through subsequent rounds, both Naruto and Talia advanced through their brackets, though not without increasingly challenging opposition. By late afternoon, the field had narrowed to 8 finalists, including both off-worlders, a development that drew increased attention from clan representatives and political observers. Naruto's semifinal match pitted him against a warrior from Clan Kyibria itself, an older, experienced fighter whose technique showed the refined economy of movement that comes only from decades of actual combat experience. The contest proved substantially more challenging than previous rounds, requiring Naruto to employ greater portions of his true capability while still maintaining his cover as a skilled but conventional fighter. The match extended longer than any previous contest, becoming a chess-like exchange of technical adjustments and counter-strategies. When Naruto finally secured victory, through a brilliant sequence had incorporated elements of his opponent's own style, he had earned not merely advancement but genuine respect from traditional Mandalorians who recognized the sophisticated exchange for what it was. A dialogue between combat philosophies conducted through action rather than words. Talia, meanwhile, faced elimination in her semifinal match against a Mandalorian champion whose reputation had been established through years of consistent victory. Their contest showcased the limitations of technique against overwhelming physical advantages when her opponent, nearly twice her size and protected by heavily modified armor, systematically negated her preferred strategies through sheer power and experience. Her eventual defeat came not through submission but ring out, a tactical choice that preserved dignity while acknowledging the reality of the matchup. As she exited the arena, Naruto noted the evaluating looks she received from clan representatives. Her performance had earned recognition despite the outcome, establishing her as someone worthy of respect within their value system. The final match paired Naruto against the Clan Visla champion, a warrior whose previous victories had demonstrated both technical mastery and tactical brilliance. As they prepared to enter the arena, Torian approached with uncharacteristic directness. "You've fought well," he acknowledged, but held back considerable capability. "Against Visla's champion, such restraint may prove costly." "I've shown what was necessary," Naruto replied carefully, while respecting the boundaries between cultures. Torian studied him with renewed assessment. Interesting choice of words. Perhaps we understand each other better than expected. He gestured toward the waiting arena. The final match carries significant honor. Regardless of outcome, your performance has opened doors that usually remain closed to outsiders. The implication was clear. Their mission objectives regarding access to historical sites were now achievable regardless of the final result, freeing Naruto to approach the championship match without conflicting priorities between performance and concealment. As Naruto entered the arena for the final contest, he sensed a shift in the atmosphere, a focused attention that transcended mere spectator interest. Representatives from all major Mandalorian factions observed with calculated assessment, evaluating not just combat capability but cultural compatibility and potential value as ally or adversary. His opponent entered from the opposite side, a warrior whose armor bore the marks of genuine battle rather than training mishaps. Most notably, he carried a traditional Beskid sword in addition to standard combat implements, signifying status within Clan Visla's hierarchy. Honors to your performance, the warrior greeted in formal Mandoa before switching to basic. Few outsiders reach this stage. Fewer still understand what it represents. The opportunity to exchange knowledge through action, Naruto replied, intuiting the cultural subtext beneath the simple greeting. I'm grateful for the education your traditions have provided. Something like approval flickered across the Mandalorian's features before his expression reset to professional neutrality. Let us complete the exchange, then. What followed was unlike any of the previous matches, a contest that transcended simple competition to become a genuine cultural dialogue. The Mandalorian fought with the full expression of his tradition's philosophy, direct engagement, technical precision, and unwavering commitment to each action once initiated. Naruto responded with a fighting style that incorporated elements of Jedi training, Uzuio tradition, and techniques adapted from the very Mandalorians he now faced. The resulting combat flowed with a rhythm that experienced warriors in the audience immediately recognized, the natural cadence that emerges when practitioners of different but equally valid disciplines engage with mutual respect rather than mere opposition. Techniques were tested, countered, adapted, and refined within the crucible of direct experience, creating a physical conversation more nuanced than words could achieve. As the match extended beyond the typical duration, Naruto made a decision that reflected both tactical assessment and cultural understanding. Rather than employing his most effective techniques to secure swift victory, he engaged fully within the parameters of traditional Mandalorian combat, matching his opponent's approach with parallel methodology rather than external advantage. The choice transformed the contest from a simple determination of superior fighter to a demonstration of cross-cultural appreciation. By voluntarily operating within Mandalorian Tekken ICAL frameworks while infusing them with his own philosophical elements, Naruto created a synthesis that visibly impressed even the most traditional observers. The conclusion came not through dramatique, technique but mutual recognition of an established truth. After 30 minutes of escalating exchanges, both combatants had demonstrated such comprehensive mastery that continued contest would be redundant rather than revelatory. In a move that surprised observers but resonated with Mandalorian tradition, both fighters simultaneously stepped back and lowered their weapons. I recognize your mastery, the Visla champion stated formally. And I yours, Naruto responded in kind. The presiding elder approached, his expression suggesting he had witnessed something unexpected yet culturally significant. After a moment's consideration, he raised both fighters' arms in the traditional gesture of victory. The trial concludes with shared honor, he announced. Two traditions meeting as equal. As it was in the ancient times before borders separated warriors of common purpose. The pronouncement carried weight beyond the immediate context, establishing precedent for cultural exchange that transcended the usual boundaries between Mandalorian society and outsiders. For their mission's purposes, it represented the ideal outcome, creating legitimate access to historical knowledge while establishing positive relationships with multiple clan representatives. The formal conclusion of the trials transitioned into a celebration that reflected Mandalorian values, practical rather than extravagant, focused on community reinforcement rather than individual glorification, and structured around the sharing of experiences rather than mere festivity. As participants and spectators gathered in the central communal area, Clan representatives approached Naruto and Talia with formal acknowledgments of their performance. Most significant was the arrival of a delegation from Clan Vizsla, including the champion whom Naruto had faced in the final match. "Your approach to our traditions deserves recognition," the warrior stated without preamble. "Particularly your choice to engage within our technical framework rather than imposing external methodology. It shows rare understanding for an outsider." "Different paths can lead to common truths," Naruto replied, employing a philosophical framework that resonated with Mandalorian perspective while remaining consistent with his own beliefs. "Indeed." The Vizsla representative gestured toward the older champion. "Vrail has extended an invitation for you to visit our ancestral forge, a privilege rarely granted to those outside the clan. It would allow continuation of the educational exchange begun today." The offer represented exactly the opportunity they had sought: access to a potential location for the Uzuio artifact, presented through legitimate cultural channels rather than covert infiltration. "I would be honored," Naruto accepted with appropriate gravity. "My research into ancient forging techniques has long suggested connections between distant cultures that history has forgotten." "Perhaps less forgotten than obscured," Vrail suggested cryptically. "The Verdoran Forge has existed since before the Republic claimed authority over galactic history. Its walls contain records predating current political configurations." The reference confirmed their suspicions about the Forge's connection to Uzuio artifacts. More importantly, it suggested Clan Vizsla maintained awareness of these connections rather than merely serving as unwitting custodians of hidden knowledge. As arrangements were formalized for their visit to the forge the following day, Ahsoka rejoined them with intelligence gathered during the trials. "Separatist agents have definitely been pursuing the same lead," she reported quietly when they had a moment of privacy. "From conversations I overheard, they attempted to access the forge days ago and were forcibly repelled by clan guardians." "Did you learn anything about what specifically they're seeking?" Naruto asked. "Only fragments. Something about spiral patterns in the original forge design that predate Mandalorian settlement of this system. The clan representatives were particularly protective of that information." Talia nodded thoughtfully. "Consistent with Uzuio influence, their architectural designs always incorporated spiral motifs that channeled energy in specific patterns. As twilight descended over the outpost, transforming the harsh desert landscape into a tapestry of deep shadows and amber light, Naruto found momentary solitude on an observation platform overlooking the trial grounds. The day's events had progressed more favorably than anticipated, creating legitimate access to their objective while establishing relationships that might prove valuable beyond the immediate mission. The Nine Tails stirred within his consciousness, its presence more contemplative than usual. "You fought well, Kit," it acknowledged. "Particularly your restraint. Many warriors forget that victory can take forms beyond mere dominance." "I wasn't fighting for dominance," Naruto replied internally. "I was fighting for understanding." "A distinction the Mandalorians recognized and respected," the fox observed. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your approach beyond tactical advantage." Their internal dialogue was interrupted by the arrival of Torian, who joined Naruto at the platform's edge with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to heights and exposures others might find unsettling. "Your victory opens conversations long closed," the Mandalorian stated without preamble. "Some will view this as opportunity, others as threat to tradition." "And you?" Naruto inquired, recognizing the statement as prelude to more significant disclosure. Torian considered the question with evident seriousness. "I see necessity. The galaxy changes whether tradition acknowledges it or not. Adaptation without compromise of core principles. This is the true Mandalorian way, though many forget." "You believe there's value in cultural exchange." "I believe there is survival in it," Torian corrected. "Isolation preserves purity but guarantees eventual extinction. Mandalore's greatest strengths came through incorporation of compatible external elements while maintaining our fundamental identity." Quote, "The perspective aligned remarkably with Uzuio philosophy as Naruto understood it, preservation through adaptation rather than rigid adherence to unchanging forms." That these two seemingly disparate cultures had reached similar conclusions perhaps explained their historical connection. "The forge you'll visit tomorrow contains more than historical artifacts," Torian continued after a contemplative pause. "It houses knowledge deliberately separated from public records, truths about Mandalorian origins that challenge conventional narratives, including connections to other cultures, including evidence that what we call the way did not originate in isolation, but through exchange with travelers from beyond known space, travelers who understood principles of energy and matter that surpassed contemporary science. The description aligned perfectly with what they knew of Uzuio's interstellar period, an era when their advanced understanding of force manipulation enabled technologies that later cultures might view as mystical rather than scientific. These travelers, Naruto ventured carefully, did they leave other evidence of their presence? Symbols, perhaps, or technological artifacts? Torian's expression suggested he recognized the question's significance beyond casual inquiry. Spiral patterns integrated into the forge's original design, mechanisms that operate through principles outside conventional engineering, and texts in a script no modern translation matrix can decode. Yet Clan Vizsla maintains these artifacts rather than surrendering them to archaeological authorities or selling them to collectors. Because we recognize value beyond academic curiosity or monetary worth, Torian stated with quiet intensity. Quote, "These artifacts contain knowledge that should remain with those who respect its power and responsibility rather than those who merely seek to exploit it." The sentiment echoed Uzuio's own approach to their most significant techniques, preservation through trusted guardianship rather than institutional control or commercial distribution. That Mandalorians had maintained this philosophy for generations without even fully understanding the artifacts' origins spoke volumes about cultural compatibility. Tomorrow's visit will be illuminating, Torian concluded. Prepare accordingly. With that cryptic advice, he departed, leaving Naruto to contemplate the complex intersection of cultures, histories, and philosophies their mission had revealed. What had begun as a straight-for-war investigation of separatist archaeological interest had evolved into something far more profound, a rediscovery of connections long buried beneath the sands of time and the artificial boundaries of political convenience. As night fully claimed the desert landscape, transforming the harsh terrain into a sea of darkness beneath a canopy of stars, Naruto rejoined his companions to prepare for their expedition to the Verdgoran Forge. Whatever awaited them there represented not merely an artifact to be secured, but a legacy to be understood, a fragment of his own heritage preserved through unexpected custodians across the vast distances of space and time. The Nine Tails, unusually contemplative, offered a final observation before subsiding into the background of Naruto's consciousness, the Spiral Titans, Kit. We approach revelations that may redefine more than mission parameters. With that prophecy echoing in his thoughts, Naruto turned his attention to practical preparations for what promised to be a pivotal day in their increasingly complex journey. The expedition to the Verdgoran Forge departed at dawn, a small convoy of rugged terrain vehicles designed for the punishing desert landscape surrounding that outpost. Naruto, Ahsoka, and Talia traveled in the lead vehicle with Vrail and 2 additional Mandalorian escorts, while support equipment and ceremonial items followed in secondary transports. The journey takes approximately 4 hours, Vrail explained as they cleared the outpost's perimeter. The forge was deliberately established in remote territory, partially for security, primarily for access to specific mineral deposits no longer found elsewhere on Mandalore. The original Beskar source, Talia noted with scholarly interest. Before modern mining depleted the primary veins. Correct, Vrail acknowledged with slight surprise at her knowledge. Though what remains is insufficient for large-scale production, it maintains cultural significance for ceremonial forging and warrior trials. As they traveled, the landscape gradually transformed from the relatively flat desert surrounding the outpost to increasingly rugged terrain, canyons carved by ancient watercourses, rocky outcroppings shaped by millennia of wind erosion, and eventually the foothills of a mountain range whose peaks disappeared into low-hanging clouds. The environment's harshness seemed to intensify with each kilometer, as though testing the determination of visitors through increasingly hostile conditions. The approach is deliberately challenging, Vrail commented, noting their observation of the terrain. In ancient times, warriors seeking weapons from the forge would walk this entire route as preparation, a journey that forged the spirit before the metal. A philosophy that transcends cultures. Naruto observed, many traditions incorporate physical challenge as prelude to significant knowledge or transformation. Vrail nodded with evident approval of the perspective. Indeed, The body must demonstrate worthiness for what the mind seeks to obtain. Their philosophical exchange continued throughout the journey, establishing a foundation of mutual respect had transcended their nominal roles as host and visitors. By the time the convoy began its final ascent toward the forge, a winding path cut into the mountain's face that permitted only single-file progress. A genuine rapport had developed that would facilitate their investigative objectives. The forge itself first appeared as a massive doorway carved directly into the mountainside, a portal 15 meters high whose surface bore intricate Mandalorian glyphs intertwined with geometric patterns of clearly different origin. Most striking were the spiral motifs integrated throughout the design, arranged by in configurations immediately recognizable to Naruto as Uzuio energy channeling formations. The Gate of Worthy Purpose, Vrail announced as they disembarked before the entrance. Established during the earliest days of Mandalorian settlement, though evidence suggests the site itself was ancient even then. The convoy members organized themselves with military precision, unloading ceremonial implements and technical equipment with practiced efficiency. Most notable was a container of raw Beskar ore, a small quantity of the precious metal apparently intended for some ritual purpose related to their visit. Tradition requires proper acknowledgement when entering the forge, Vrail explained, directing their attention to preparations being made before the massive doors. Particularly, when bringing outsiders to witness its secrets. The ceremony that followed demonstrated the depth of Mandalorian cultural continuity, a ritual clearly performed identically for generations, possibly centuries. Warriors positioned themselves in precise formations, recited traditional phrases in archaic Mandoa, and presented symbolic offerings to ancestral guardians represented by stylized helmets positioned flanking the entrance. Most significantly, the raw Beskar ore was placed upon a stone altar before the doors, where it would remain until their departure, a gesture Vrail explained as recognition that knowledge precedes creation, wisdom precedes power. As the ceremony concluded, the massive doors began to open, not through visible mechanical means but apparently responding to specified vibrational patterns created during the ritual. The grinding of ancient stone echoed across the mountainside as an opening large enough to accommodate their entire party gradually appeared. Few outsiders have witnessed what lies within, Vrail told them as they prepared to enter. Observe with respect, question with purpose, and touch nothing without explicit permission. They crossed the threshold into cool darkness that gradually resolved into soft illumination as their eyes adapted. The source of light became apparent as they proceeded deeper, phosphorescent minerals embedded in the ling that created a natural illumination requiring no technology to maintain. The forge's main chamber exceeded expectations in both scale and complexity. Carved from the living mountain, its ceiling soared 30 meters overhead while the floor extended nearly 100 meters in diameter. At the center stood the forge itself, an elaborate construction of stone, metal, and crystal that incorporated design elements from multiple cultural traditions into harmonious synthesis. Most striking was the chamber's overall design, a perfect spiral that began at the entrance and curved gradually inward toward the central forge. Channels cut into the stone floor followed this spiral pattern, converging at the center in a configuration Naruto immediately recognized as a massive version of Uzuio's energy channeling arrays. The original forge design predates our earliest records, Vrail explained, leading them along the spiral path toward the center. Our ancestors discovered it and adapted it rather than created it anew, a rare acknowledgement of external wisdom in our otherwise self-reliant history. These patterns, Talia observed, indicating the channels. They appear designed to direct energy flows in specific configurations. Quote, precisely, Vrail confirmed. When the forge operates at full capacity, these channels fill with a liquid substance our ancestors called Earth's blood, AM. Material that emerges from deeper within the mountain during specific alignments of Mandalore's moons. The description immediately suggested connections to force-conductive materials similar to those used in Uzuio's most sophisticated energy manipulation techniques. That such substances would exist on Mandalore, a planet not generally recognized for force phenomena, represented significant evidence of deliberate selection rather than coincidental discovery. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.